Ladies and gentlemen, Lifestylist Podcast listeners, one and all, Julie Piatt, a.k.a. SriMati, is here with me, and she's about to lead us in a little grounding, opening meditation / ceremony to get us going here. So listen up. If you're driving, pull over now. If you're not, close your eyes and dive in.
Thank you. Okay, so I'm just really honored to be here. It's such a sacred blessing to be able to have the privilege to exchange energy with Luke today. And so before we begin, let's just take a moment and focus our energy as we bring all of our awareness into this present moment. Let's connect with our breath as we take a deep, long inhale. And then release it with a relaxed exhale. And once again, inhaling. And exhaling, relaxing, feeling all of your awareness focusing into this moment, this energetic exchange. And one more time, inhaling. And exhaling, relaxing. And as we open the field in sacred service to the highest expression of the expanded presence of Luke's story and SriMati, to collaborate, to co-create and exchange for the highest divine expression, sharing, activation, initiation, and inspiration for everybody listening. We ask that everyone tuning in from across the multiverse, both in body and out of body, be joined in harmony, in beauty, in love. It is with great joy that we begin this conversation, and may we open to the most expanded, organic, living light code. And so it is.
I want to hire you to do every podcast recording that I do. Just be in my back pocket. I'm like, okay, before we start, we got to get grounded. That was beautiful. Thank you.
I'll do a little recording for you.
Seriously.
Thank you for inviting me to do that. And it's really super relevant in my life right now. And what I'm finding is that we all have this amazing energetic group or energetic, I want to say, resource that we can tap into, that we can really utilize. And if you're like me, you get so busy and, we're always in the task that we often forget to just take a moment. Just take a moment. So thank you for asking me to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. There's, I was listening to someone the other day, one of these, it's Tony Robbins or Brendan Burchard, one of these personal development guys, and they were talking about resetting your energy between transitions throughout your day. And it's something I've been trying to practice. Well, not trying, I have been practicing. Is so say I have a meeting with one person over here, and then I've got to jump in my car, go over here, see the next person, etc. Before I jump into the next thing, I take a few moments and I just breathe. I get in gratitude. I sense that field of love, and I bring that into the environment. But sometimes when there's a lot going on, such as today, I mean, those people that are watching on social media or this YouTube video later, you can't see the other side of what we're seeing, but there's lights, there's 3 cameras, there's podcast equipment, and I have my boy Mikey here helping me out, but still I'm in technician mode. And so it's really nice to be able to have a grounding moment and get into my soul, into my spirit, to have a human connection and kind of leave all of that technical stuff behind and go into the vortex that we're about to enter into. So it's a great practice, and I think it's something that we could all use more of.
Super beautiful. And I mean, I liken it to, tuning the experience and gathering all of us, everybody watching, you and me, and actually tuning us to a like frequency.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people too probably don't realize that many performers or people that are in the public eye in whatever capacity have practices that prepare them, whether they be an athlete, the host of a TV show, again, Tony Robbins. I mean, you can watch the documentary on him, and he's got all the trampoline and the breathing exercise and stuff. And and seeing those things for me is very validating because I'm doing that stuff all the time before kind of the main event of the day, whatever that is. In this case, being the podcast, I'm in my car doing all sorts of breath work and chanting and praying and getting myself pumped up. And I think it's really important for people to understand when they perhaps see someone like you that just appears very zen and has their shit together and is bringing this great energy, that there are practices that enable that capacity. It's not just like, oh yeah, I'm just on all the time.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's a whole way of getting up in the morning. It's the way you get up in the morning. It's the way your feet hit the floor in the morning. So yeah, it's a constant thing and all throughout the day.
Yeah, people ask me sometimes, how do you find time to meditate twice a day? And I'm like, how do you not find time? I would be a freaking maniac if I didn't meditate. It's very rare that I miss. Every once in a while I miss my afternoon meditation just because whatever, I'm busy at 6 or 7 and I don't like to do it too late. But the morning one, oh my God, the world is a much better place because I take that time and just be with myself. And those are the passive kind of practices that help keep us centered. So funny thing is we're sitting here in your home. It's also the home, those of you listening, of her amazing husband, Rich Roll, was kind enough to be on my podcast. I think in the first 10 episodes or something. It was really something I'm very grateful for. I forgot to mention that to him when he was here. But, you know, I was asking people that are kind of prominent in various fields at the time when I started to be on my show. And I don't think at the time I'd even put out an episode. I was just kind of putting the first 15 in the can or something. And he was one of my guests. But when Rich was on my show, he had sent me and the show producer his media kit, his beautiful PDF. And this house that we're in now was in the photographs. And I thought, God, there's something about that house. It looks very familiar. I feel like I've been there, but why would I have been to his house? We just met. And he's lived there for a long time. And then when he finally came over, he said, dude, there's something about your house. I feel like I've been there. It's really weird. Was it in this lifetime? And he said, yeah, we used to rent it out, or I guess still do, as you said, for locations, for photo shoots. And I was like, holy shit. I came here, must have been 15 years ago, and when I was a fashion stylist, and did a shoot for Microsoft or something like that.
So perfect.
Yeah, and I remember pulling up the driveway and just going, oh my God, I need to make this happen someday.
Oh.
And it's funny now because I've been living in the city right in the middle of LA for 30 years.
Wow.
I moved there when I was 19. And now I just have such a strong, I mean, it's not even a calling, it's a nagging. Mm-hmm. It's like that movie Get Out. It's like, I get this message like, Luke, get the F out. And where I imagine myself is in Topanga or out here, somewhere removed from the city. So it's beautiful that you've been able to manifest this for yourself and your family. And it's really nice to be here in the capacity I am today. Isn't it just funny, you think back to earlier times in life, if you would have told me whatever that was 15 years ago when I was an assistant, like, yeah, someday you'll have this thing called a podcast. It's kind of like a radio show, but there's no boss and you get to just do your thing and have conversations with people about God. I would have never believed that was possible. So anyway, just
crazy.
Trip.
Welcome back.
Thank you. Yeah, a trip down memory lane is just such a great space. I wish,
cool.
I mean, the people on YouTube, you can see it. Maybe I'll do a little handheld shots, but it's just, oh my God, what a gorgeous place to live and share energy. So as we jump in here, what are you most excited about in your personal life, in your career, relationship, family? What's going on with you that's just like got you on fire right now?
Oh my God, that's such a big question. Well, what I'm excited about now is actually I've come to a completion period with the work that I've been doing with my husband, Rich Roll. I just published 3 books in the last year and a half. I'm a vegan chef, and I've been working with him, sort of spreading the message of plant-based lifestyle and health and wellness. I've also guested on his podcast over, I think, 50 times and launched my own podcast, Divine Throughline. So that's all been really, really great. And I've come to this juncture in my evolution where I am now stepping into my own brand. So the things that are on tap for me coming up is moving into my spiritual work in a much deeper way. So I'm working on actually a new strategy with Divine Throughline that's going to be very directed. So I'm going to sort of lay out a program that's going to have a path and a trajectory over the weeks and months, and really provide people with tools to clear trauma, to activate their own divine blueprint. So that's very, very beautiful. I just turned in the proposal for my memoir, actually 2 days ago. So my agent has that, and so I'll be writing my memoir this year.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, and it's I don't know if you know, but I've been married 3 times and was a fashion designer and was in interior design. And it seems like I've lived 9 lives inside.
I totally relate to that.
You got it, right?
I haven't been married 3 times, but I've lived a lot of lifetimes.
A lot of lifetimes.
Within this one, yeah.
Yeah, so, and there's been, I'm old enough now that the fruits of ceremony of having a spiritual perspective, of holding that Christ vision of someone in their greatest essence have come to fruition, and I've seen things sort of develop. And so anyway, I feel very blessed, and just it's very meaningful to be able to tell that story, and telling it is a devotional act to my own life, to be able to have the privilege of actually writing it, of actually telling that. In addition to that, I'm launching my own brand, which is going to be a collection of products. One of those is my cheese. I published a book last year,
which I just had some variation of. I think.
You had a little.
And also when we were at that gathering in Malibu, where were we?
It was For the Wild. It was the Conscious City Guide.
Was it Lautner, or who built that house?
No, it was the Wright Ranch.
Oh yeah. Frank Lloyd Wright. Yeah, fantastic property. But you showed up. I was like, this girl's cool. You showed up with this beautiful picnic basket. You had all your kids, and you start busting out these like vegan mozzarella balls and fresh basil. And I was like, this is better food than I've ever seen at a bar. It wasn't a barbecue, but this is an outdoor event. You brought a whole kitchen, basically, is the story. And I was like, that cheese was bomb, though.
Thank you. Thanks so much.
And it didn't bother my digestive system either. Sometimes some plant-based foods, some raw foods, my body does not. I don't know, it's my dosha or whatever, but some of them are hard for me to tolerate.
No, I think it's fillers, and I think it's a lot of what's in those. And one of the things that I was very, very happy about with my cheese exploration is that was my experience creating the cheese over 2 years. I never had a stomach ache, and I never had a problem assimilating. So I know the ingredients are very pure, and I'm happy to hear you say that, because it's almost like you get the taste and the tangy and the cheesy and the creamy. You had fresh mozzarella.
Yeah.
It's quite extraordinary.
It was like a caprese situation.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it was amazing.
It was funny because we were just in Italy doing our retreat, Plant Power Italia. And since it was on the heels of the release of my last cookbook, we really
Which is gorgeous, by the way.
Thank
no
you.
Ass kissing, I swear to God. That book is freaking... I have a collection of cookbooks from people that I've interviewed in my kitchen, and I don't cook. I mean, literally, I have a frying pan and I have a Vitamix, and that's the extent of my whole culinary skills. But I look at those books, and like I was telling you earlier, I go, man, I have a collection of cookbooks. I just need a good mate that loves to cook, and I'd be like, just make all that stuff, and we're good. Like, I have the recipes, and that book's just so beautiful. And so many people like Shiva Rose and the High Vibrational Beauty from the Cat,
Carolyn.
Cat Beauty Girls. Like all of you are just putting out the most beautiful books, not only good content, but just so well designed and just so high vibe. So it's a great book. I want everyone to go out and get it.
Happy to be in that tribe for sure. It was fun actually serving the cheese to the Italians, because I knew.
Oh, were you nervous?
Actually, I didn't even think about it, and then I heard that the coach for Juventus, is it Juventus?
I don't know.
I'm not in sports. It's
me either.
Sorry,
Rich would know.
Yeah, Rich would know. It's Juventus, I think. It's like the top soccer organization.
Oh, okay.
He was cooking out of my cookbook, and then the Italians were freaking out over the mozzarella. I was shocked. I couldn't believe it.
Oh, that's awesome.
Really
and what's your cheese book called? This Cheese is Nuts?
This Cheese is Nuts, yeah. And the brand will be This Cheese is Nuts.
Cool.
But the one thing I wanted to tell you about, because of your fashion background, is I was a fashion designer. I closed my company in 97, and I think that's when you began.
Yeah.
And
you got out, and I picked up the torch.
Yeah, you were like, I'll go right in. So I had a women's collection. I had 100 styles. I sold Neiman's, Nordstrom.
Wow,
Macy's.
legit.
I was legit.
Wow.
All over everywhere. Cover Women's Wear Daily, all that stuff.
Damn.
And then when I left, I was like, I'm never doing that again, ever. It just was so relentless. And recently, as part of my spiritual exploration, I've been really getting in touch with the artist in me. So I'm a painter, a sculptor, I draw, I also was a fashion designer. And all of this has come full circle, and I actually have a tribe, a close tribe of 3 other individuals that are very expressed in design at a very high level. And we're going to form a collective, and we're going to launch a new version of couture, sort of fulfilling everything that we love about great design without going into the waste, the destruction,
Awesome.
all of the
Oh, yeah.
pillaging of
Yeah.
whatever you do.
Yeah.
So anyway, so it was kind of beautiful that you asked me to be on your show now, and you were coming now, because right now
that's
everything
awesome.
fashion is up for me. So this
Right,
is
right.
like when I leave you today, I'm going to the Getty to a fashion event there. So it's very interesting.
yeah.
And literally what is it? Like 1997. It's been like a long time.
Yeah.
So
That's interesting, because it seems like you're revisiting it from more of an artistic point of view and having some meaning behind it, which took me a long time in fashion. I was a stylist for many years, and honestly, I was kind of embarrassed that I was I mean, this is before it was cool, but people used to ask me what I did, and I'd be like, I'm a musician, because I play too, and I used to be in bands, and I thought being a stylist was so lame. And then it started to become popular and more widely known outside of the industry, and I thought, wow, I have kind of a cool job. Maybe it's not that lame.
And you're like,
and
I'm a stylist.
Well, yeah, totally. I was like, oh, that's the first thing I'll tell you, musician, whatever. But no, the point being is in the art of it. It took me some years to kind of disassociate the fashion industry from the vapid materialism of all of that brand name, hierarchy, weird stuff, the caste system of what you wear. I just always thought that was ridiculous. And it wasn't until I started really learning more about fashion, because I realized that I had to become more competent in order to become more successful. And then eventually I saw the art, and I started looking at Comme des Garçons and all of these really interesting brands. And then you go into Barney's and touch and feel that clothing. There's a different energy to it. Mm-hmm. But that's leaving aside the whole ecological thing too. I mean, that's like, we could go off. It's another conversation. But even now, whenever I get clothing, I always clean it before I wear it, just because of the chemicals and fire retardants and the weird stuff they put, the anti-wrinkle treatments and dyes and all this crazy stuff. So I'm a huge supporter of the art of fashion, but also ecologically sound production of clothing that has a high vibe and that is well designed. So I'm excited about that, because, I hate to say this, but a lot of the clothing that's eco-friendly isn't really in my style.
Right.
It's exactly. Like, I go, oh, that's good for you. Right. Congratulations. I'm not wearing it, though. Yes. I'm still going to go back to,
But I think that's something, the thing that I've been led to in my spiritual exploration is really honoring the fact that I have this taste level, the fact that I love these environments, and really part of my mission is to bring beauty to the world, is to bring beauty first to myself and then to the world. So I went through a stage like early on in my spiritual path where I was like, okay, I have to shave my head and wear a robe. And then I was like, that's just another outfit. It's just that kind of outfit. It's still an outfit.
Right.
So I've learned to, just really embrace that and just own it. It's okay. And we'll have to see how this collective plays out. But the intention is to, couture, like I'll pitch it to you now and see what you think. So couture normally is a manipulation. It's a spinning of reality, and it's a false truth that's put on somebody to try to manipulate them to spend absorbent amount of money on something, right? To gain an image.
Yeah, and there's a scarcity model within it too, because there's a finite number of those pieces, and they're not available to everyone at all times.
And so if you get it, then you're special,
yeah.
Blah, blah, blah. So what I'm working with in my art is the same thing that we started this podcast and how we began is I had an experience creating medicinal art for a client who commissioned me to paint for him for 4 months. And I went into meditation every day, and I channeled his highest directive into these paintings. And they were life transformative. And so what I know is that as artists, we're missing an entire opportunity to use ceremony with art, music, whatever it is you do, with this intention to create an actual elevated quantum result. And so with this team of people, we're mixing very developed awareness of the unseen energies, sincere heart and devotion for the highest outcome for an individual, not a calculated, not I want to make this to get money or get things, but really what would be your highest energy supportive to you, mixed with another artist who's channeling words in certain configurations mixed with one of the best designers on planet Earth. And so we're spinning like a new version of couture. Yeah, there'll only be one in the entire world. It will be expensive, but it will be a medicinal talisman that will actually catapult you on your mission.
Damn.
Do you like it?
I'm in. I love it.
Okay,
it's very cool. I'm also someone who appreciates the consciousness and energy of all things.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, the orchid has a certain calibration of energy, a certain buzz. And this is something I talk about a lot in fashion, actually, with my business school of style, which teaches people how to become a fashion stylist, is to help them understand the variance within the scale of quality in clothing. And that it's great if your client can only afford H&M, like you get H&M. But if your client can afford Dior, you get them Dior. And I always encourage them to just go into some of those high-end stores and try things on and get a feel for it. It's not just the label or the price tag. There's a certain energy because of the care that goes into constructing those garments and designing them. And so I truly believe that everything has a level of energy, any type of art. I mean, that's why even something like graffiti that to one eye would look like a mess on the side of a building, to someone who's able to perceive the energy of something, if it's not done in a way that's disrespectful to the owner of the building, there's certain energetic and karmic confines to that. But even like what might appear like the ugliest street art to someone still has an inherent value, right?
Absolutely.
And so I love exploring that, and that's my language. And I think a lot of that for me has been, I perceived that through music. Because earlier in my life, when I was having so much turmoil inside and just so much emotional pain and suicidal ideation and homicidal ideation and I just hated life, the only music that resonated with me was like punk rock and metal, And now every once in a while I try to put on something like that, and I'm going to get into it and just go back to 14 years old. And it's like, oh God, one song I'm kind of into it. And I'm like, dude, put on some mantra or classical. It's just, I'm at a different vibrational match to that. So yeah, that's
cool.
That's really neat stuff. So, God, there's so many things I want to cover with you, and I love it when I sit down with a guest and I'm like, so do you have a heart out? Like, do you have a publicist around that's going to kick me out of here? You're like, no, let's go. Because I have a long list of things that I want to cover with you, because you're a wealth of information. And as you said, you've lived a few lifetimes within one. So there's so many different areas that I want to cover. But you mentioned doing your type of biography book, and what I know about your life, which is a little, I find very interesting. So I want to take us back here to you at 9 years old, moving from a house in the mountains in Colorado and ending up in Anchorage, Alaska in a tract home. I find what little I know of that story interesting. I'd like to dive deeper into your past.
How did you even get that? I suddenly feel like you've done this like extra special dimensional research. I'm like, did I tell anybody that?
I know things.
So he's dialed in. Okay, I'm impressed. So you want me to start there? How I made it there?
Yeah.
Well,
because you talked about your memoir, and I find people's stories interesting for a number of reasons. A, because the hero's journey within each story from someone who's been able to transcend challenges in their life, I think holds so much value for listeners. And I have a sense that in that journey, there's some challenges that you overcame.
Definitely. So I'm the youngest of 5 kids, and my parents were very adventurous individuals. My mom's from Chile, and my dad is from Texas. And they actually met in South America. My dad was a very Indiana Jones type of guy, pilot, crashed planes, was rescued from sharks, mapped the jungles of the Amazon. And I'm going to tell his story because it's really, really profound. Is my mom was, her father left her family when she was 16. And in Chile, they were of an upper class. And divorce was it was not done. And so when this happened, it was quite a shaming of her in her community. And she had to support her sister and her mother at age 16. So my mom spoke English quite well, and she ended up getting a job as a teletype secretary in an American company. And she fell in love with an American engineer and was set to be married to him. And one day, a month before the wedding, she received a message that her fiance had drowned in a boating accident. My dad was in the Amazon mapping the jungles for the same company, and he was this man's replacement. And my mom tells the
What?
story. Yeah.
Oh my God, that's crazy.
My mom tells the story that when he walked through the door, she knew that was her husband. So she married my dad.
Are they still alive?
My mom is still alive. My dad passed away 2 years ago, but they were married for 66 years.
Oh, interesting.
So, yeah,
okay.
up until, and had 5 kids. And so my dad brought her back to Texas, and my mom left her entire family, in Chile to come to a new land. And, like there was an article in the paper when she arrived. Like it was like she was an alien,
That totally throws out my theory that in order for a marriage and a long-term partnership to last, that you need to spend a really long time getting to know that person before you dive in.
I'll tell you no to that as well.
Okay.
Yeah,
okay.
It can be very immediate. So anyways, my dad was always, he went to the School of Mines. He was an engineer. He was a Navy pilot. He wanted to move to Alaska. At age 45, he wanted to leave a corporate job at Martin Marietta Company and move to Alaska.
He was an avid hunter and fisherman, right?
Avid hunter and fisherman. Yeah. So he literally packed up his travel-all and took my older brother, and they left. They drove to Alaska. And he left us in Colorado for 2 years while he went up with my brother and got his business together. And then he sent for us. And my mom loaded 4 kids and a dog, a pointer dog, into a GMC Hornet, and we drove from Colorado all the way up to Seattle.
I feel like a Hornet is a really small car.
It's a pretty small car.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay.
So we drove to Alaska. So that's how I ended up making it to Alaska. And we had grown up in this idyllic mountain community, which reminds me a lot of where I am now and is a lot of the reason
Where was that in Colorado?
It was next to Genesee. Do you know where Genesee is?
I feel like I do. I used to live in outside of Aspen, and then my dad lives in Grand Junction.
You know where the Flying Saucer House is?
Yeah.
Right there.
Yes,
but on the other side of the highway.
Oh, off the 70.
Yeah.
So in between Glenwood Springs and Denver.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
In a community called Paradise Hills.
Ah, okay.
So
when I was a kid, my grandmother lived not far from there in a place called Estes Park.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. We used to go get spring water and stuff in those mountains around there. Yeah. Anyway,
so
carry on.
Another. So so we moved to Alaska. I was very excited to move. I was game into it. My older brothers and sisters were really devastated because they had made the cheerleading squad and the wrestling team and all these things, and they were just torn out of. It was the days where you didn't really ask your kids what they wanted to do; you just took them. So when I arrived,
there weren't any family council meetings.
There was no family council meetings, unlike today.
Yeah.
So I ended up in Alaska, and it was very disappointing. It was a not very pretty city. It rained, I think, 30 days when we arrived in August, and we had no furniture, and we slept on, just the floor. And then, so it was kind of a drag, honestly. People hear Alaska, and they think, oh, it's amazing. It was dark a lot of the time, so it was pretty depressing.
Yeah, that's far north. I've been to Alaska. It's another universe up there. Just energetically, you're on a different planet almost too.
Definitely. Yeah. And also I would say that my dad, for all of his love of the outdoors, it was something that he did solo. So it wasn't like we're going to gather up all the family and, go out.
He didn't take you kids hunting and fishing and stuff?
No. He would take off. Like he would go out in the bush for a month and, come back with a bear that he shot and skinned. And
do you think you ending up where you are now, living this very plant-based lifestyle, has anything to do with that?
I just think I was like this. My dad and I had a very interesting. He's been the main relationship that I came in to reconcile in my life, and it's taken me all these years to actually even realize that. So I was not my dad's favorite. He was an engineer. 2 + 2 = 4, and I would say, Dad, 2 + 2 is 22. And he would get furious, like just complete, like, what are you talking about? And I remember when he came to my first fashion show, like, I just launched this collection. He couldn't talk, like he couldn't believe that I had manifested all of that. So I did blow his mind quite a lot, and he loved me. He was a devoted father. We just were not alike, and he didn't like anything of India, yoga, none of it. So we spent I had a lot of hurt over that, and that led to a lot of promiscuous early relationships with boys trying to make that connection. I was like, oh, I'm going to find this love, So in my teens in Alaska, which was really a community of a lot of drug use because it's a gateway to the East, So I was slipped my first.
And weed was legal there too, right?
And weed was legal there, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
God, I would have loved that.
People had like grow closets everywhere, and you know, and we had like we called it tie stick.
Tie sticks,
tie sticks, like all red and hairy. Like all that,
Maui Wowie. That's the 70s weed shit. Yeah.
But they had this one pot that was grown in Alaska in Wasilla, which is where Sarah Palin is from.
Okay.
But they have the intense light 24/7. So the carrots grow this big and the tomatoes are this big. Like, it's crazy. And so the pot is like huge, and they call it Matanuska Thunderfuck.
Nice.
That's the name of it.
Oh, that's amazing.
So anyway, so it was this kind of crazy life, and I was trying to plug that in. And also I was a very independent, very old soul child. And so, you know, I probably dictated a lot of I was happy I didn't have a lot of supervision. Like, I preferred it. I preferred my parents not coming to my, you know, track meets, or, you know, I had it handled. I had my life pretty much handled. But the other really crazy thing is that I hiked for hours in the wilderness in Alaska, completely unsupervised, with no water, no cell phone, no bear spray.
Right.
Literally nothing.
That's what comes to mind to me is that, did you see that that documentary film, Grizzly Man, I think it was called?
I don't think I did.
Oh, God. It was about this, you know, like bear whisperer sort of fellow that did really unsafe things in relationship to grizzly bears in Alaska. And I don't want to spoil the ending, but it didn't turn out so well for him.
Yeah,
that's when I think of that area of the world, I just think of bears everywhere.
It's so weird is that, you know, as a parent now, you know, I have 4 kids and raised 5. And I mean, to think that it would just be like that, like, okay, see you. And I would just go into that mountain for 20 hours maybe.
Wow.
And it was light all the time. So many times we would misjudge, and the tide would come in, and we would have to climb over some cliff in another place. And somehow, I really credit that experience, though, to awakening my creativity to a very large funnel.
So, when you were there and it was, you know, this drug culture going on with the youth, how caught up in that did you get? And was it ever difficult for you to stop? Or?
I got very caught up in it. You know, I tended to run with people 10 years older than I was ever since I was little. So I was with people I shouldn't have been with. And I did smoked a lot of pot, did a lot of cocaine, smoked cocaine. I never did anything like heroin, or I never shot up or anything like that, but I did those type of drugs, and I would do it like all night, and then, you know, feel horrible, and then spend the week recovering, and then do it again the next weekend. So it was sort of that pattern over many, many, many years. And I realized that it wasn't a way that I liked to feel. So first I stopped smoking pot. And then, you know, by the time I left high school, you could have put a mound of cocaine in front of me and I would never touch it. I was just done. Like, I literally
know the feeling.
You know the feeling.
Yeah. Took me a little bit longer to get there, but yeah.
But I didn't have the addiction element.
You don't have that gene.
I think that Rich had.
Yeah.
I don't think I have that gene.
Do you believe that some of us humans are more predisposed to get caught in that net than others?
Like, as far as addiction?
Yeah.
Oh yeah. No, and I don't think it's a gene. I think it's an entity possession. It's another energy that lives inside.
Really?
Oh yeah.
I've not yet heard this perspective.
You should listen to my podcast with Mishka. You know,
No.
Rich's friend Mishka.
No, I don't.
Shabali. He's an atheist. He came on my podcast like early on, and it was quite profound because I had this awareness of what addiction is. And during the podcast, he described it to me without me telling him.
Wow.
So I was like, what's an addiction? And he basically
And
told
he has
me.
the same perspective?
Well, yeah. I mean, he described it as something that's attached in the base of his spine.
Wow.
I mean, it was crazy.
That's interesting. I'm fascinated by this because I've been sober, coming up on almost 22 years now, right? And I was the kid that didn't outgrow it, and it just got worse and worse and worse. And it's not something I need to figure out. I just know that, I don't know how else to say this, but God gave me salvation. I mean, I've talked about it on my show, and I try to dance around that. I was just released from bondage in a very miraculous and sudden way. It happened in one moment, and it never came back.
Beautiful.
Which is amazing. But I'm still fascinated by it as a human phenomenon because It's just something that affects so many people so
Yes.
negatively. And in all these years of being sober and being very involved in recovery and, working with people in sort of a mentor capacity and having great guides in my life, spiritual guides and sober guides and whatnot, I find it so strange as to why some of us get it and why some don't. It's so weird. And I've heard probably the most logical explanation from Gabor Mate, and his whole thing, and he's one of the foremost experts on addiction. His whole thing is that all addiction is the result of trauma. Okay, and when I first heard him talk about that, I thought, well, that can't be, because I know a lot of people that grew up with this perfect nuclear family where they got tons of love and support and no divorce and no sex abuse and they didn't get spanked and everything was great. And they grew up to be a diehard junkie just like me.
Yes.
And so how do you reconcile that? And so digging into his work a little deeper and listening to more interviews and stuff, he defines trauma in a multitude of ways. That there is some trauma that's, I guess, what I would call maybe more a passive trauma, where you're the middle child and you maybe get ignored. And it's not like you got your ass beat all the time, but you experienced some sort of trauma and that your needs weren't met as you were being raised, right? But I still, as much as I try to get around that, I'm like, I don't know. I've met hundreds, if not thousands of addicts and alcoholics in all these years. And I swear a lot of the worst junkies, they weren't ignored. They didn't have any trauma. I mean, most of us have, okay? But there are those exceptions. So I always find it interesting why it turns out that way. And looking at I have two half brothers. I know for me, the second I think probably my first drink at maybe 6 years old. First time I tried pot was probably 8 years old. I was reading pornography, using pornography when I was like 6. I mean, anything I could do to feel better and escape. I did experience trauma. And then I have a brother, two half brothers. One of them, I guess, had his own version of trauma, not like mine to that degree, but he just, from the second he touched anything, he was instantly addicted, just like me. My other brother, you could give him $100,000 and he won't drink more than 2 beers. I mean, I try to encourage him, like, don't you ever want to smoke weed? He's like, why? I go, dude, because you can get away with it.
Yeah.
It won't hurt you. Like, you won't get addicted. You're immune to addiction. He's like, why would I want to feel like that? It feels like shit. I have more than 2 beers. I feel horrible the next day. I go, who cares? You get to get fucked up that night. It's amazing. He is wired differently. I honestly don't think you could turn him into a drug addict. Yeah. So what? Those 2 kids, they grew up with the same mom, the same dad. They had trauma. There was a divorce. There was issues. But like, why did one, become an addict by the time he's 14 and the other one just not be interested? So is it the entities or is it in our DNA?
So let's talk about it a little bit more. This is like a great
fertile
ground to talk about.
I love this.
Thank you. And you're very intelligent and you're very intuitive. So awesome. You're right. Okay. So let me give first a basic example just to sort of lay the groundwork. So this isn't associated with an addiction, but it might give everybody sort of like an idea of why I have this perspective. So I worked with this spiritual teacher early in my youth, not that early in my youth, early in my path. And he worked with past life regression and resolving past lifetimes. And he gave me an example of a client that he had worked with. A woman came to him and her body was deteriorating. Literally, her legs were failing, like everything was shutting down. And he worked with her a couple times and did, this clearing that I've been trained in. And the third time, she mentions to him that some 7 years before, she was driving behind her husband on the highway and saw him get hit head on by a semi truck and sliced in half and killed.
Oh my God.
So he's like, oh, good you told me that, right? So what happens is we're empathic beings, right? We're empathic, and energy is something, just like thoughts are things, right? If I get mad at you and I'm vibing you, you're going to feel it, right? We've all had that kind of experience, so it's not that crazy. So what happened is her empathy and her love for her loved one, his energy and his trauma seated inside of her body, and she was processing. It's almost like they got stuck together at a certain layer, and she was processing his trauma in her own body. So my teacher did 1 or 2 sessions and the body completely restored itself. Okay. So
Is this teacher still around?
No, he's not. And I won't even give his name, but I worked with him for 2 years. Every week I did a past life regression every week for 2 years and trained with him.
Wow.
That's a lot. It became too much. It was like, all right, enough already. Anyway, that's just it's an example. So if we look at addiction and we look at this planet Earth, this system that we're all incarnated here, addiction is rampant. It is running through so many threads of what it means to be a human alive. And it can be all kinds of addiction. Sexual addiction is quite, the whole sexual imbalance is quite an issue, quite a challenge. But addiction as well, and you're right, why is it in some people and not in other people? But oftentimes you will see an ancestral path. So many of us, as you know, we come in with the ancestral makeup of whatever group we've incarnated into. And many of us that are incarnating at this moment in planetary evolution is because we made the agreement to clear that miasm or that issue within this ancestral line. So a lot of the people that I'm working with, I'm reframing these pictures of you, of who Luke is. And instead of saying that you're an addict, I'm saying that you're a powerful, courageous being who agreed to come in and look at it and clear it. So if you really did clear it and you had that moment and you're free of it, you clear 7 generations back and 7 generations forward. But the problem is we are spiritual beings having a human experience, or possibly multidimensional beings having a simultaneous experience. And if we're only looking at this level, there's only so much information. So there is an ability, if we understand, we can learn processes to go in and clear. We can rescind from the program. We can say, I no longer participate in this relationship. And if you want to call it an entity or an energy or a thought form or a memory, you could call it any of those things. Let's not be dramatic about it. Everybody has aspects and layers of life that we're all dealing with. But you could claim responsibility for your own body and not allow any other energy in your body or light bodies, other energetic bodies, without your consent. If we do not embody our entire life form, someone or something else will. Because if something's vacant and there's no one there, and this whole realm it's largely a parasitic experience. Someone's trying to suck something from you, get something from you, grab here. My whole work and focus is about gathering everything internally. So it's that we have the universe within us, and self-sourcing, understanding that each life form has the energy to fulfill itself in celebration, in perfection. So this is where, we can handle a certain amount of physical things. Diet is amazing. Meditation is amazing. All of these other things are amazing. Understanding that this is an instrument for your spirit, soul is amazing. And there are more processes, that are to be considered in what it means to be a human being. And if it is all physical, and I love AA, bless AA, it's been incredible for Rich, incredible. I credit AA to giving me an intimate relationship with my man, because we can process conflict at this amazingly deep level. And every time he's been in trouble, all those guys have been there for him, and they're beautiful. I love them so much. And AA is a great place to be born in, but maybe you shouldn't die there. There's more. There's just more.
Oh my God,
just add on to it.
Yeah. Well, that's, it's funny, and I've seen within recovery, and thank you for that. Within recovery, I know at various times I've sort of gotten stuck, right? And just when you think you've arrived, then another whole area of the human experience enters, and you realize, shit, here's another area in which I lack power. I lack the ability to break a pattern that's giving me negative results. And it's funny because I've looked a lot at the 12 steps because they've been so transformative to me. Mm-hmm. But the 11th step is the one where we seek to improve our conscious contact with God through prayer and meditation, right? And asking for the knowledge of God's will. And so to me, that's the gateway to everything else.
I love that.
Because you have to be able to improve. It's not just like, cool, yeah, I've got the monkey off my back. I'm learning how to be of service. I'm helping some other people. I've sort of cleaned up my past and made my amends and, healed the relationships of this lifetime. But I've got to constantly be improving that relationship with God. Meaning I've got to, for me, be allowing more areas of my own, not my body, but as you're saying, beyond that in the different realms of my experience, I've got to be continually surrendering those over to whatever my God is. And to me, that's what keeps it interesting,
Yeah.
And in so doing, there's this inoculation against old addictions resurfacing and also just new ones coming in, because you become much more aware of it. So I really appreciate that perspective. And I never thought about that idea that, I think the really thing that got me was that the idea of a vacuum being created when I'm not fully embodied.
Yeah.
In other words, if there's a kind of a tear in the lining of my consciousness, and there's space in me that's not been explored, perhaps shadows that haven't been brought to light, then whoosh, there's going to be something on an energetic level that comes in to fill that space, which is more than likely, if you have the propensity to be addictive, it's going to be something compulsive, something addictive, something that's deleterious to your own evolution and well-being.
Yeah, and ultimately it's your gift. Like we were talking earlier. So it's not like it's for our evolution. Everything is happening for you, not to you. So it's not scary. It's actually not scary. It's not debilitating. To me, it's expansive.
Yeah.
Because if you know what to look for, and at least I can say, I am the only being allowed in my space. So everything else has to leave. That's very basic. There are other ways, but why can't this God force just swoop down and hit us all on the head and make everything fine? And it's because we're here. This is Earth School. It's here for our evolution. It's here for us to feel the friction and the alchemy and learn about these different aspects of ourselves. So if you have demons that show up, they're your teachers. Dark things are your teachers. Thank God. It's what makes you interesting. It's what we came here for, is to transform these things. However, I feel that we are at a point in evolution where, it's just not enough to just be in the body. It's not doing it. Like it's not actually, it's not offering the solution. And I see it in my clients and, people on retreat and people that I do private sessions with, they end up telling me their biggest secret, their deepest shame that is there. And what I can do is reframe this for them as their greatest gift. And in the process, realign the energies, clean the energies, teach them how to seal their field. We have to understand we are light beings. We're not just a physical body. So if you're sensitive and you walk in a place, you might feel a lot of things. Maybe a lot of that isn't even you. You just don't know, but you have to, we have the opportunity to be so much more than we ever thought we were. And there's also a lot of manipulation and impulses and implants that are put into the planetary grid. And we think that there are feelings. Like milk does a body good, or how about my entitlement over animals? It's like I was raised that way. It never felt good in my mouth. And then later when I discovered yoga, and this is like an open, everyone's unique. And I'm not here to preach an ism. I'm just here to talk about deep self-connection and awareness. And so, there are these attitudes. I'll share one which is really hilarious to me is, had you interviewed me before I dyed my hair blonde, I would have told you that I have absolutely no, I have tons of blonde friends. I love blondes. And then when I had blonde hair, I got to look at all of the implants about blondes in my psyche, because it's in the culture, right?
Yeah.
And that's such a silly one, but it was interesting. A lot of times we have these thoughts They're not our thoughts. They've been placed there for a reason. And now, the veil's coming down and we're understanding that the system is not what we thought it was. Like every single structure is coming down.
Yeah.
Political, education, financial, spiritual, like every single thing. And so
it's exciting.
It's so great.
It's a great time to be alive.
It really is.
The veil, the matrix is disintegrating.
Yeah.
And you know what? It's funny. I think a lot of it is really due to the advancement of technology and the sharing of ideas like that's happening right now in the long form. I think a lot about this. Every once in a while I'll be sitting in an airport or something and the news is on or some very like mainstream media and I look at that and I go, people are still doing this? Because, I don't have a TV. I have no idea what's going on in the world. I've unplugged from that whole scene because I realized there's so much programming and mind control and it's just pathologically demented to me, most media. And so now I'm learning from podcasts and going to conferences and from watching YouTube videos, and people now have the ability to have these long form conversations where I'm not beholden to any of advertisers or any control grid of information. We can talk about whatever the hell we want. Some people are going to resonate, some won't. But people listen to podcasts like mine and like yours and your husband Rich's and learn things that are so transformative. They can never be plugged back in to that grid. It's like once you see, I always use the example, if you're in the woods and you're hiking along the trail and you see a snake and you get startled and then you look closely and you see that it's a discarded rope, you can never believe it's a snake again.
Right.
And once the veil's been lifted from that manipulation, which is usually trying to control you or sell you something or control you through, wants and needs and desires that aren't even yours really.
Yes.
But once you unplug from that, it's much easier to start seeing the ways that it's proliferating into your life. So now that I'm largely unplugged, it's very noticeable to me that I'm really addicted to Instagram. I see the dopamine every time I refresh my feed and are there likes, are there DMs? Like I want that little hit. I wouldn't be aware of that though if I wasn't unplugged from all of it at large. So there's so much contrast that's created through having autonomy and having the information that I have vetted with my spirit and my intuition enter into my consciousness. I don't listen to music. I don't watch shows. I don't watch movies. I don't read books. I don't interact with other people on a interpersonal level unless they meet a certain criteria of consciousness and evolution that I think is beneficial to the highest good. Right. So I just don't engage with that. So it's interesting to see when people still do. I go, whoa, holy shit. I think because I'm on this path, I think everyone's on the path.
Right.
So
You're
it's
in your own bubble.
Yeah, I don't know where I'm going with that. It's exciting right now. I think media, independent media rather, to specify, is so exciting because we have access to information that's so transformative and so powerful. And a lot of it's free. I mean, you can take people's online courses and all of that, but I mean, you got to listen, you got to sit through a couple ads in the beginning of my show, maybe, unless you figured out that 15-second fast forward button, which I know a lot of us do.
Yeah.
But other than that, it's like, dude, you just chill and drive around and hear from someone like you that can describe that, just for me, that vacuum, the concept you just gave me was like, holy shit. So I need to be filling my glass with that clean, pristine, crystalline water to displace that muddy water that's still lurking in the shadows.
And I think you just identified, if you want to distill down, what is the highest divine purpose of what we're doing? It is just that, to offer somebody the possibility of another view. It's almost like they just peek over the fence and they're like, oh, I just peeked over the fence. So it doesn't matter if they believe everything we've talked about or they relate or they don't relate, but it's offering that there is another way, that there's another path, that there's another world waiting, that I really think that's really, really, really profound. And I also have the experience. I haven't had a TV for over 10 years. Rich was kicking and screaming when I got rid of his TV. He was like fighting for, what do you mean? I've given everything up. It was like that. Man, yeah. And I'll never forget, I got some of the worst hate mail after I mentioned on one of his podcasts to get rid of your TV. Literally, like cuss word, like horrible name calling for the TV.
Getting trolled about that.
I was like, really? Like, it's just a TV.
Right.
But now this is, okay, so this is Instagram is becoming a little bit like that for me right now. And I'm having a moment with it.
It's a tough one.
It's kind of a tough one. You know, I'm like, wait a second, like I got rid of a TV so I wouldn't hear all that when I go through.
Yeah.
And, you know, I think there is a lot, an opportunity for us, especially beings like you and me and like many of us, but to actually really curate your content, you know, even a refinement. And so I'm interested in the concepts of minimalism in content. So when we think about content and so much being shared and everybody's like we're on a schedule, like, well, this is how much you have to share and, you know, trying to get followers and whatever you're trying to do. There's an etheric collection of energy of everything that gets put out. It exists somewhere. And so, as I was telling you, my beautiful yoga therapist teacher, Michael Manfredo, delivered a Zen bomb to me a couple months ago, where I was in a yoga pose, trying to get my leg in a certain place, and there was no room. And I said, okay, I'll move the mat. And then he just says to me, or maybe you could move the bed. And that one statement has slayed me for the last two months. Because I was considering that I was hearing this tape in my head, like, I dedicated my life to moving the bed, you know, and you realize that from the point of perspective, how much perspective do we really have? If we haven't awakened certain aspects of ourselves, do we really know what we're doing? And then I have this criteria, which I've always had, which I ask myself, what am I doing? Why am I doing it? And is it in the highest divine alignment with what I'm here to share? And so I've taken the last 2 months, I stopped posting, and I've been in exploration and meditation of being very clear on the most efficient, minimal, powerful use of messaging for my own brand. And I think it's vital right now that we all become very discerning about what we're doing. So just what you were just saying, that you don't spend time with people unless they fit a certain criteria, that's very advanced wisdom, because you become the energy that you hang around with.
Yeah.
And
I call it the bless and block technique.
Bless and block.
that's more for actually that's more for trolls, you know. So it's funny. Like
bless and block.
Rather than cuz every once in a while I get a troll too. Yeah. It's not very often, maybe I'm not popular enough, but it's like the first instinct of the ego is like, I'll show you, motherfucker. Oh, right. Really? Yeah. And I want to just fire back at them and just devastate them psychologically. You know, obviously I'm not going to do that. Yeah. So then it's like, how about not engaging and just blocking them? And then it's just energetically, it serves the highest good to actually help them by not engaging too, because to engage is just to invite more of that darkness that's spewing forth.
Right. Anyway. I mean, absolutely. I agree with you. And the other thing is, I think a really amazing place that I am embodying in my own life, and I think that this is vital for us to be the way showers, the leaders, the on the front edge of a lot of things, is having the courage to be disliked. Like, just literally, now I'm not inviting anything, like, let's just say grace and peace and beauty all over that. Right. But the thing is that in order to, I was talking to Moby once and at some, plant-based event, and he was sharing that, he just doesn't read any comments, but, he's Moby. So he has like a good, he's already like made his mark and, with his music and everything. But he just said that if he reads any reviews and if he reads any comments, then it colors who he is in the world. And I think that there's a very real truth to that. And so I have this totem that I've been working with recently, and it's an animal. It's water tiger. So the reason that, and my bracelet says water tiger on it, and the reason is because in getting very clear with what my mission is, who I am, my divine design, reading some of the teachings of Osho and some of the wonderful stories that he's told about life forms not competing with each other. Like a squirrel isn't going to be bummed out that, like the eagle could fly to the top of the mountain, and it gets very spontaneous and very visceral and very natural in that state. So I've been sitting back into this totem of mine, which is water tiger, which is my Chinese year, and also many attributes of my being. But the water aspect was given to me by this Zen master who was reminding me of my sensitivity, because I have a very, very heightened sensitivity, which is a great power and also has to be cared for. So I think by getting into this example, of a life form on that, you get out of the mental, what does society want me to do? What did my parents want me to do? What's expected of me? Or wait, Luke has a shirt with red stars. Maybe I should have that shirt. How we're always looking out, and it's generated through advertising and it's a spin. We're always being shown some way of being. So that's been super, super powerful for me in these couple months of exploration.
That's amazing. I honor your ability to do that. I swear, it's interesting, when I get into nature, it's difficult for me to care about my phone. I feel at home. I look at that thing, I'm like, oh God. I'll still use it to document the adventures because it's part of the lifestyle. I'm the lifestylist. I want to show people how to have an amazing life. But it's work, where the rest of the time when I'm in the city and I'm sort of in that subconsciously agitated nervous system space with all these EMFs and the things and this, it's like the phone is just there, and the idea right now is of just putting it away for a while is terrifying.
Really?
Yeah, because not as much because of the compulsivity of it, but because I'm like, but the brand, bro, everyone's going to leave if I don't post, you know what I mean? But it's funny. I have limited myself though, somewhat consciously, to one Instagram post per day. I don't want to cloud the feed, you know what I'm saying? So I do a pretty deliberate post that I think has some value or meaning, or is just even inspiring. Sometimes I just find something cool. I'm really into cabins and beautiful homes like this.
Yeah, I love your spaces. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like my vision board.
Yeah,
my Insta feed is it's my vision, or at least part of it. I don't put the female partner visions on there because that would be weird.
That would be so weird.
But the other sort of material visions, places I'd like to go, spaces that I'd like to hold. So, yes. So,
can I just say one thing before
you can say whatever you want.
That? I just feel that, yes, I'm with you on all of that. And I will just put into the mix here that if you're posting about meditating, you're not meditating. If you're posting about hiking, you're not hiking. There's a part,
totally,
and it's we all do it, but it's oh, this is so cool. It's a pool. I'm going to post it.
Yeah.
Where are you? Where's your consciousness? And it's I had a birthday a few weeks ago, and I just had 25 super close friends come over, a beautiful chef named Chloe, who actually won our free spot on the Italy trip, happened to be in town, and I asked her to cook for me, and we didn't post anything, and we all were here. There were no postings, and I was skin to skin.
Was that a party rule? Hey, let's just put our phones away?
I kind of didn't say anything, but everybody just kind of knew,
right,
because I've really been in an inner moment.
I get that vibe sometimes, especially when you're... if you're spending time with people who have somewhat of a public presence, you can kind of tell when you walk in a place, you're like, oh yeah, this isn't hey, let's all do selfies night.
No, it just wasn't.
You can pick up on that,
The air was still and the food was delicious, and, we sat and my son sang a set for us, and it was absolutely beautiful, and we didn't share it with anyone, and it was really needed. And I just want to put that out there. I had a friend contact me, because I'll go through my Insta feed and unfollow tons of people, because I'm trying to curate what I'm doing. And I have, tons of kids and businesses and everything else. And it's not that I don't value what people are doing. It's that I'm trying to affect a certain ignition in me for a certain thing. And suddenly I'll be I'll just unfollow hundreds of people or something, just to sort of help me get more clear.
Yeah.
And a good friend of me, texted me and she was like, I'm devastated. I saw it went on. I saw you unfollowed me.
I've had that happen
like
so many times.
But I was like, and I mean, this is a person that is really an amazing artist who I love, who I've been very involved with in deep healing. She knows where I live. She has my phone, she has my cell phone, like everything. And when she said you unfollowed me, like I just called her, I was like, yeah, I unfollowed like 400 people last month, because I'm not taking it as that measure.
Yeah.
And then, she kind of freaked out and I was like, dude, if you want connection, then let's go on a hike and let's talk. And she kind of, pushed back a little bit. And I looked at our feed and I said, the last time you contacted me was 2015. How good of friends are we? And she was like, "You're right."
Damn.
So we met on the trail.
Wow.
And we talked in real
cool.
life.
Yeah, yeah.
And she's like, "Okay, you don't have to follow me now." I'm like, "No, I'm following you now." But it was an interesting experience, right?
Yeah.
And so I'm just saying, don't think that if you're posting your life, that's your life, because someday we're going to all wake up and the internet's not going to be there anymore. It's going to be like, oh, it's gone. Then what are we doing? So I love it. I do love it. I connect with people all over the world. It's beautiful. I'm looking to find a real beautiful cadence with it, where I'm really making sure that I'm having enough of these physical experiences, which is why I made you lunch before we started today, so that we could share some food together before.
I appreciate that. Before we make it our hangout a media event.
Before we do it. Exactly.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that. Are you living your life or are you posting? Because even pre-social media, just when I love photography, I've not tried to be a photographer per se, but whenever I go places, I just go, God, I have to capture this moment. And I just I'm visually oriented. What's the word? Orientated? Oriented. Yes, that. Oriented. And so I just see things and I go, oh my God, that's a beautiful shot. It's kind of that thing. But even when I was a teenager and would go to, deep into the jungles in Mexico and just all these amazing places I would travel, I would always have the sense that I need to take 2 trips. One trip to document the experiences, to document the places, the people, the things, and then another trip to actually just enjoy time. And I think this is very common for people that go on vacation because we're so busy doing social media and doing the things. It's almost like today, let's say this was not a podcast and we had just, met in an event like Whitma and said, man, we should hang out sometime. We have a lot in common. Let's just chill. I mean, God, it would be such a different experience than having to kind of be on mentally, emotionally, to have the equipment, the gear, to look presentable and all of that. It does color things when you're capturing those things to share. So it's a delicate balance there. I haven't quite sorted that out myself.
I think both are good. I just think we shouldn't go as humanity, we like to go, kale's good for you, and then we eat kale till we're sick.
Right.
So,
I've done that.
You've done that.
Yeah.
So the thing is it's like, just understand that there is real life.
Yeah.
Real life is happening,
Yeah.
and not everything has to be shared. I mean, I feel like right now I've been completely burnt out, actually, from doing 3 cookbooks in a year and a half.
Yeah, that's madness.
I took probably 2 months off cooking, and now just out of sheer frustration of there being no good food, like even at restaurants that I can actually get, I've started creating. But I made an amazing spread last night, and I just didn't post it because I've done it. I've done my work with food. Like there's lots.
Right.
There's 500 recipes that I've shared. So I've done my
tour. Go buy the books.
So yeah,
it's there.
There you go.
On that note, before we change lanes here, because there's some other things I really want to get into. I mean, one of the main things being just the parenting piece. Whoa, huge piece. It seems like you've done a good job at that. So I want to learn from you.
We hope so. We'll see.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll just interview the kids and we'll find out.
Let's get the kids in.
How many of them are out of jail?
They would love that. Actually.
Yeah, maybe we'll do that sometime. But on the social front, you talked about that fear of facing rejection publicly, of not being liked, of not being accepted. On the other side of having those sacred things that you keep private and personal, those experiences, something that I think is really healthy in our culture in these long-form conversations in independent media is that it's become very commonplace for people to be extremely revelatory about their secrets and their shadow and their shame and their trauma. And I've noticed just in the past 2 years of having this show, people that I interview, other hosts and guests that I hear on other podcasts, YouTube videos, etc., I mean, people are open about their addiction issues. No one used to talk about that shit.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, even Rich, I heard him on his show, he was like, yeah, I'm an alcoholic. I was like, what, dude?
Mm-hmm.
You just said that out loud?
Mm-hmm.
I never used to tell anyone that about myself. And then furthermore, hearing really prominent people talk about sexual abuse that they had endured as a kid, and, just all the family system sickness and all of that. And every time someone, in a tactful way, you use the word discernment. I think that's a really important principle. But if it's not done with sensationalism, if it's done to serve the highest good and for the healing of all, I get inspired every time someone kind of opens up their closet door a little bit and talks about something, because then I feel safe to talk about it. And I get to heal that part of myself that's been hidden. And what's interesting now is that people are using social media to talk about all sorts of things like that. And sometimes it's a little too much if there's not discernment. But overall, I think that it's a really healthy movement now that all of these things that used to be so shameful are becoming commonplace. What's your view on sharing very personal things publicly in an effort to heal from them and to help other people know that they're not alone?
Well, I think it's super powerful. I do think that there are different levels of it. I think that because it's become effective, there's a certain set of the population that basically enters in on it with the intention of, getting good traction with it. You know what I mean? Like it has to be relevant and in the context of something that makes sense. So, in our case.
So in a sensational sort of way.
Like again, everything is intention. Like, where is your intention with it? And is it really necessary at that moment?
Right.
I don't think it should be, because I also think that this is actually what I know. What I know is that in order to really share in the most powerful way, it's very powerful when you're actually through it. When you've come through the fire, and then you've risen, you kind of have alchemized the entire situation.
Yes.
And I don't mean to say that, don't be so black and white with me on that, but that's what I know. Because I know in Rich and my scenario, he wrote about his addiction in Finding Ultra in his memoir, which was, widely read. And so, everybody knew about the alcohol addiction in there. There are many other subplots that were going on at the same time, like our 9-year financial collapse. And that was a very scary thing to speak about publicly, because what had been put forth, at least in the energetic grid with money, had been, if you tell somebody that you're failing, they will eat you up. It will cause like an attack to go further. It didn't feel safe at all. Also during the time, I'm sitting in this beautiful home, and it's important to note that I didn't pay mortgage, property taxes, or insurance for 5 years. For 5 years. And I was doing ceremony and prayer and meditation and, cultivating an energetic to hold a reality that we would come out of this cycle, and that it would catch, and we would be able to reconcile everything. And now everything's fine, so now it's easy for me to speak about it. However, when I was in those very deep, tender, scary moments, there were no shows about banks frauding the public. I was on the front lines of that, and I would talk to business people who would tell me, they're going to come and take your home, and everybody thought I was insane, literally an insane person living here for all those years. And I just had this conviction and knew that this home was mine, not as a possession, but as a living energetic, and as something that was part of my co-creation, in my life. So had I spoken about that prematurely, that would have compromised my mastery and my ability to be a warrior and embody what I need to. So let's be clear.
Totally.
Right?
That's a huge distinction.
It's a huge distinction.
That's the dividing line, perhaps, between, I guess it's like you said, it's the intention, but it's serving the highest good, in that it's useful to people that are perhaps not in a position where they've overcome said dilemma. Mm-hmm.
And if you share prematurely when you have not embodied, it may compromise your situation, and it also doesn't have the effect. So I was telling somebody in an interview earlier today that this whole journey that I've been on, you could tell me, SriMati, I think you're full of shit, and and I don't believe you, and it does nothing to me because I earned this. It's in my cellular makeup. No one can ever take it away from me. So I have 9 years of being in ceremony, of intentional action, devotion, compassion, holding the highest, holding my humanity as my cars got repossessed, holding my humanity as, the bank refused me. I had no bank account for 4 years.
Damn.
And then my friend Saul Ray.
I relate to that.
I relate to that, right?
Back in the day, yeah.
Yeah, but
Well, I stole money when I was first sober. I was so treacherous. Bank of America actually accidentally gave me too much money in a deposit or something. Yeah.
That never happened.
And so I was like, all right, fuck you guys. And I took the money and spent it. And then they shut me down and they put me in this bank account jail.
Lockdown.
Yeah.
Right,
It's like this other credit system.
Then they all know.
Yeah.
All the banks know.
And I couldn't get a bank account.
Anywhere,
I had to go to some weird little credit union. I totally forgot about that. That's why, God, that's so funny. God, I'm so grateful. Things have changed.
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I forgot what I was saying.
I did too, and I'm sorry
Anyway,
I'm sorry for interrupting.
No, that was relevant.
But God, what you just
wait, go ahead.
No, you go ahead. You might have caught the thought again.
My point is it's like, okay, we all have these challenges, right? We have these sacred moments. So people, I would tell people, I'm not like a deadbeat. I'm in my sacred moment. This is my moment of alchemy. And so I met it in that way, and I met it for my family, and I showed that example to my kids. And it went on way longer than I expected it to. Oh my goodness. Had I known it was going to take that long, I might have decided an exit strategy or something.
Right, that's hardcore.
It was hardcore with 4 kids, really 5 kids, because my nephew lived with me. And it also was beautiful and magical and unpredictable and sweet. And, some of the best Christmases we had when we had no money, we would just make up routines for each other. Or it was actually awesome.
Your gift is, I went out in the yard and gathered these sticks.
Yeah. Or one of the funniest ones is it was my daughter's 6-year birthday, and I had no money for her party, but she was only, she was 6. So I was like, what does she know about time? So my other daughter said, oh, it's Jai's birthday. And I go, well, I had this kind of skill where I'd be like, we're going to wait on that. We're going to wait for the flow, and then something's going to arise. And that's how I surfed the whole thing. And Martha's got mad at me, and she's like, today's her birthday. And I was like, you're right. So I went up in my closet, gathered objects from an old marriage, drove to the pawn shop with my daughter, went in, and I was like, this will be an awesome homeschooling experiment because she's going to see how they test the silver. And I left an hour later with $630, which might have been $6,000. It was a lot of money to me.
Yeah.
And my daughter was like, oh, I'm so relieved. I thought we were going to have to sit there all day till somebody bought it.
Oh, yeah.
So, that night.
A swap meet or something,
like
right?
A swap
Yeah.
meet. But that night, I made a train cake. We invited all her little toys. It was just my kids and her. And we had a beautiful meal, and we had a couple presents for her. And I had groceries for the month, and it was one of the most beautiful moments ever. I'll never forget that day. So it's not what happens to you, it's how you are in the face of what happens to you. And I would just say that spiritual alchemy sometimes requires privacy. And so if I'm doing very potent ceremony, I'm not going to broadcast it all over the airwaves.
Right.
Because it's going to leak the energy.
This is so interesting, and I'm gonna tell you why, for a number of reasons, but it's just immediately brought up, and thank God I can remember this spike of inspiration that I had. But I've been someone in, I don't want to say my whole life, but probably my adult life, since I was a drug addict and a drug dealer. I think that's when this started, the idea of being in debt, right? So when you're a drug addict and a drug dealer, you get everything fronted because you have no goddamn money because you spend it on drugs. So you get your dealer, they give you a big batch of drugs, you parcel it out, you sell it, then you have your supply, then you pay them back afterwards. So hence began in high school being in debt to drug dealers, which is not smart because if you don't pay, there can be repercussions of that. Thankfully, I never suffered those. I somehow knew I didn't want to interrupt the supply chain for myself. Repercussions are fine, but supply chain, don't fuck with that. So that began, and then when I got sober, I for the first time in my life at 26 years old, I got credit cards because I'd never had bank accounts and stuff. I was just totally underground, and so I got bank accounts, credit cards. The minute I got my first few credit cards, I went out to Circuit City and bought VCRs. This is back in the day, and just new stereo for my car. And I looked at a line of credit like cash flow. Like if I have $25,000 in credit, that means I have 25 grand cash in the bank. That's just literally, I don't know where I got this idea, but that was in my head. And so I just was always in debt, even though I was always earning money, even especially after I got sober, I did much better. And then when I got into being a fashion stylist, the way that industry works, it's just the way it is when you get booked on a job, say for a celebrity, to do a music video, red carpet, whatever, you're given a budget, and that's the allotted amount you can spend on the wardrobe. And how it works is you spend all the money on your credit cards, and then when you invoice your client for your day rate, you also invoice them for the expenses, and you give them an expense report. So maybe I spent 15 grand on a job on my credit cards, I turn in all the receipts, and I get paid back. Well, in the 17 years of my being a stylist, because I'm sort of a non-linear guy, I don't keep track of numbers, and I don't even know what a checkbook is, how you balance it. I've just never been that guy. So I would get in the habit of getting those reimbursements, and then I would put that money in my checking account, and I would kind of forget to go pay the cards off. And I would see my account and go, shit, I have 20 grand in the bank. And someone would say, hey, you want to go to Brazil? I'm like, fuck yeah, let's go. And I would go spend all that money and not pay my card. So I did this for a number of years. Eventually I racked up $100,000 in credit card debt. And I've had that debt hanging over my head for I don't know how many years, for years. I've never told anyone except my closest friends. No way would I ever talk about that publicly. However, 2 weeks ago, 2 years ago, I cut up my credit cards, except business cards. I vowed that I would never spend one penny in my life on anything unless I have it in my hand. I do not charge shit anymore. Yeah. Finally, the spiritual lesson. Who knows how many lifetimes I've been a debtor. It's a horrible principle to disobey because of the shame and the pressure and all of that. But I never told anyone because I was so ashamed. But once I'd paid it all off, I found myself talking about it. Yeah, just as you said, okay. Because there's an inherent lesson into it, and my intention is to tell someone else out there that it's don't be a dumbass, don't get into debt. Yeah, right. Don't do as I say, not as I've done, as my stepdad used to tell me when he was sitting around smoking weed all day, or not mom's boyfriend. They never got married. But it's now I'm starting to share it because I've overcome that shit. Yes. I guarantee you I will never, just like I will never have a drink of alcohol for the rest of my life. I mean, unless there's some scientific cure that makes you not drink too much or something. But I could safely say it. I'm halfway joking, but I will never drink and I will never spend money that I don't own. Yeah. I might finance a home or something like that, but no unsecured debt. It's like I'm sober with money now. Me too. And that's sober, and then sex comes later. It's another conversation, right? Which was another tough lesson to learn. But now I feel that I can share about it, and I've been interviewed on a couple podcasts in the last couple of weeks, and it's intuitively come up. Oh, what's going on with you? What are you working on? Well, shit, I just became debt-free, and I've never felt better, Great. It's such a burden. Beautiful. But I think it's really important what you said, and to not use our struggles as clickbait and sensationalism and just to get attention in social media, but to really do the inner work, like you said, to do it in secret and private until you've overcome it might be perhaps a higher path in some cases. No, and I think also you'll find that if you do it, you'll feel internally a discomfort with it, and then that discomfort is in fact the tear in the auric field where the energy can backlash on you. So it's not even like it likely will not be in your best interest. So it's not that everyone should share everything all the time. And again, it goes back to, tantric wisdom, for whom and when. That's the answer. Right. What about this? It depends. Context. Yeah. What about this? It depends. For whom and when. Where are you? Are you really safe? Are you really embodied in that lesson? Have you digested it? Have you fully digested it? Is it part of your cellular makeup? Then share. Then you can share. Right. I love it. That's a great lesson. I knew that and didn't even know I knew it.
You totally knew
that's
it.
Amazing.
You totally knew it.
Okay, so I want to get into some relationship stuff.
Okay.
It's as I was explaining before we turned the mics on, it's an area of life that I'm really studying and learning about right now, by not engaging in them and taking a look at myself. So when I see someone that's in what appears to be a successful long-term relationship, I'm very curious as to how that works. And you mentioned the ability that you and Rich have to resolve conflicts. And I'm very interested in fine-tuning communication and codependency issues and love addiction and love avoidance and all of these sort of mental health and psychological issues that many of us face. So first one I want to ask about your relationship with Rich, and obviously feel free to not divulge anything that you feel is private, but my dog's she's barking in her sleep. She has dreams and she'll do these little squeaky barks.
Oh.
So freaking cute. Oh my God, I love that dog.
She's happy.
Sweetie, it's okay, Cookie. She's in every podcast now, so the audience, I'm sorry you guys, you're going to have to get used to it because I just can't leave her at home. So what I want to ask you first, in relation to being in relation with someone who has had alcohol addictions and things like that, was Rich sober when you guys got together already?
Yeah, so my trick was, the way life put us together is I was his first relationship out of rehab.
Oh shit, I'm sorry for you.
He had been celibate for a year and a half. So he had been completely celibate. He had gone to, recovery for 3 months, a 3-month away program.
Wow.
So he had very advanced alcoholism, like that of a 60-year-old. So it was very severe. And we met in a yoga class, and I was getting out of a 10-year marriage with the father of my two boys, and was looking forward to dating a lot, just completely free. And he had sort of tried to get married. There was a wedding with 500 people, and the wedding and the marriage never happened. The girl didn't sign the certificate. And they ended up breaking up on the honeymoon. Like that, that's a movie, actually.
Oh, that's amazing. It sounds like a Ben Stiller movie or something.
Yeah, it was totally a Ben Stiller movie. So
maybe like a little bit more of a dark comedy, but yeah.
Yeah, so he was looking for like a 20-something, young girl who didn't want to get married. And then, he met me in my 30s with 2 little boys. So it was just not what either one of us were planning on.
Interesting.
So yeah, and I mean, when I met him, like, I never even considered that he was an alcoholic. Like, he was never an alcoholic to me. He was a child of God. It was never, like, I didn't even fret about it. I wasn't like, oh my goodness, Well,
he seemed committed to the path.
He's very committed to the path, but I don't know. It just wasn't in my body. I just didn't even think about it. Yeah. Honestly.
Well, I have to digress a little bit here. When it comes to things like addictive tendencies and things like that, I've always somewhat wrestled with the idea of just subjectively labeling oneself. And it's kind of a weird thing, like within the confines of, say, addiction recovery from alcohol, for instance. The first step in being free of that bondage is admitting that it's got me. I'm powerless. Like, I need a higher power to help me. And so you admit to yourself that you're an alcoholic, thereby labeling yourself with this thing.
Right,
it's a mind game. It's semantics. So it's like, I've never had a problem. I'm Luke. I'm an alcoholic. I mean, I am, dude. If I have one shot or one beer, I'll end up in another fucking country in 72 hours with some really weird, dangerous people. I have no idea what's going to happen. So I have no problem with that. But to say other areas, like let's say, I had problems with spending too much money and I was in debt, like calling myself a debtor is like, that's low energy. Or if I've had too much sex and it's been detrimental to my relationships or my well-being or the well-being of others, to say I'm a sex addict is like, I don't like the way that fits at all. No, I'm not. I'm a fucking limitless spiritual being in a meat suit that is prone to doing some things too much. So what's your view of if you didn't think of him as an alcoholic, what's your view of someone who's so addicted using that tool of admission and self-honesty to say, okay, I raise my hand, I am a this, I am a that, versus are you empowering that negative pattern and giving it energy by labeling yourself as such?
Well, I think it's a progression.
You get where I'm going with this?
I get what you're going
My
with.
questions sometimes are 10 minutes long.
I'm with you.
I have to get the thought out.
I totally got it. I'm wired the same way
Okay.
you are. So I think it's a progression. So I think in the beginning, if you're in denial or you're being overcome by some power that is basically using you and you are out of control and you are not self-regulating or self-choosing, then that admission in the history of AA is very vital. You know, I'm an alcoholic. And again, I think it's a great place to be born, but I think you have to add on to that. So it's like that is true, and Rich works the step, and I hold this vision: you are a divine being of consciousness, and you are never just that. So in my work with my clients, in my work with, if I was to do, you know, a session with anyone who has any kind of those addictions, the flip of perspective is to empower. So it's like you are an expanded being who chose to experience itself through that vibration. That does not make you less than I am or less than anybody. And in my expanded perspective right now, in this realm, it is simply a choice. And another choice might be to be in a namaste group, which to me is also a cage. Both are cages. And what we're doing in this body right now at this moment on planet Earth is we're synthesizing past and future into a present point. And through neutrality, through the integration of all experiences, and me not denying my promiscuity when I was young, that hurt my being. But I was doing it as a master, knowing at some level what I was doing. So when I integrate it, I heal that for all humanity. So I integrate it, I come into neutral, and I transcend this paradigm. And then I am a free being. So you are a multidimensional creator. That's who you are. And if you're, you know, that's why in my view, I have no judgment on a homeless person as being less than, or a drug addict, or any version of anything as being less than a monk or it's a choice of experience. And by taking that perspective and turning the victimness of it into an opportunity to know yourself, I empower holding the vision that you are a powerful creator.
I like it. I'm in. Great answer. So you're in your third marriage.
Yeah.
Do you have an affinity
For marriage?
Do you have an affinity historically for men that are alcoholics, drug addicts, in recovery or not? Has that been a pattern?
Actually, no. It's kind of really super interesting because I already talked about my separation from my father and trying to fill that void. My first marriage was with a karmic relationship that I had to experience. And my feeling in this relationship was that I had to get in the race car and run it into the wall and explode it in order to be done with it. It was an abusive relationship. I was physically beaten and also verbally abused for many years. And it's not so black and white. I mean, obviously he was in a very sexy life, in the music business, world touring rock bands, and also I was a shadow musician at the time, unexpressed. So I was idolizing musicians as gods. And that was my trap. That was my entry into that. So even though he wasn't the musician, he was the manager of the musician. That wound in me was how I got hooked in the whole nightmare. And that took 7 years. It was a 7-year process. I was free of him for a year and a half in the middle. I left him many times. He would wait outside my work, beg me, cry, lose 25 pounds, go to therapy for 2 years. It just, how maybe do you have recurring dreams where you use, when you first...
Back in the day.
Right?
Yeah.
And you're like, oh.
Every once in a while now. It's funny to just hold that thought. I want to hear the rest of the story, but the one reoccurring dream I have, and this because I was such a pothead, just my whole life. I mean, I smoked weed my whole childhood. It was my savior. It was my God. It was my best friend. I love that plant, marijuana. I just can't do it anymore. But my dream is always that I'm still sober, I'm fucking crushing it, my life's totally together, and I just smoke weed now, but I'm totally cool. It's not a problem, but I'm still living this great sober spiritual life, and also I smoke weed. That's usually the dream. Strange.
That's funny.
Anyway.
Well, I would have this recurring dream that he wouldn't let go of my leg. And I would be saying, I don't love you, please leave me, and he wouldn't let go. And that was my recurring nightmare.
Wow.
So that was
quite literal,
it
sounds like.
Literal.
Yeah.
And then from that, and I was creatively blocked because he was stifling my creativity. So he was, would want me to cut my hair off, would want me, it was like very controlling, very weird. And I was young, I was in my early 20s. And so I was trying to figure it out. So then later when I met the boy's dad, it was a love at first sight. Met him during an interview on Valentine's Day and recognized him from another time space. I mean, literally. And he was the epitome of a knight in shining armor. He literally rescued me right out of that situation. He loved me into my creativity, literally just celebrated me and loved me. And in the early days, I had a very hard time being with him because he was so nice that it felt bizarre to me. Like I had to actually talk through it. I had to say, okay, you're sitting really close to me and this is making me feel uncomfortable. And, he had a really funny way about him and he would like make a joke about it. But I always talked to him about it and then we would resolve it and we could move the next way. So to the next step. And I had a huge creative arc with him. I became a fashion designer, had my own label, was dressing, all the elite of real estate. He owned one of the biggest real estate companies in the country here, was one of the main partners. He was the most eligible bachelor in real estate. I had no idea who he was. I made him drive from like Beverly Hills down to Manhattan Beach for like months while he dated me. It just was crazy, but I knew him and instantly just adored him. And we had a beautiful marriage. We skied together every season, like 25 days. He had his own career. I had my own career. He had 5,000 employees. I was like the wife of the CFO or whatever you call it, CEO of the company. And it was a really incredible time. I built a home with him overlooking all of Malibu on the top of the hill. This is the prime lot overlooking everything. And it was magical. And at the end of 8.5 years, the entire thing came to completion. It was over. And it was shocking to me. If you had interviewed me during that time, I would have said, Luke, I have a love that most people only dream of. And I had it. And not only that, I had my 2 boys during that time, my beautiful sons who are extraordinary individuals who I later would go to become musicians with and create this music over 7 years together with my glorious babies. So that was just amazing. So it was shocking to me that it ended, that it came to completion. And we had 11 things that happened that would have, any one of those things would have marked the completion. But ultimately, it was my spirit calling me into greater levels of myself. And so it's weird. I had my abusive karmic hell. I had my fairy tale, really illusion, because no one can rescue anybody, and afterwards it falls through your fingers. And if you're subscribing to the rescue paradigm, which is the romantic paradigm that is put forth on planet Earth, so if you have a rescuer, then you have a victim. It's the same as a victim-victimizer. Because as a being, I have enough energy to fulfill myself inherent in my own design. I don't need you to rescue me. And in fact, you rescuing me is a lowering of my vibration. So what I talk about in romantic relationship, that's why this romantic paradigm that's put forth in Disney, and it's always the girl's in a coma and she has to be waken up by the prince, and the older woman is a hag. So it puts the subconscious, that if you get to a certain age, you're discarded, you're useless.
Right.
But really in the Vedas, the woman, the feminine, comes into her most power in her after childbearing years. Like, this is my moment to be everything that I am. But in our culture, it says that after childbearing, you're going to trade me in for a younger model who can fulfill that
brutal.
That whole set. It's brutal. And
I mean,
really,
our culture in general, I think, holds very little value for age,
Exactly.
which is strange.
Exactly.
In other cultures, the elderly are revered, especially in the Asian cultures and in India.
Very much.
Yeah.
Because it's recognized of that. And the other thing is, I mean, it was beautiful, this monk that I meditate with, Swami Vidyadishananda, like he was talking about, now is my biggest power moment. Like now's what I've lived my whole life for. This isn't, like I'm just getting started. I haven't even started yet. I'm just coming in, So, but in our culture, that's what we are taught. And it's interesting because I did a self-process where I disconnected from that paradigm that was living inside of me, that belief of being traded in. Because if you believe that, you will attract that to you because it's your pain, right? So I think as a group, women have an opportunity to rescind participation in that program because it's not true. And I'm rewriting a new way to be fully in everything that it means to be a woman at my age. My relationship with Rich has surpassed anything that I ever thought possible in a romantic relationship.
Wow.
And it has come from a friction of opposites. We could not be more more not alike, more opposite.
I get that sense.
Right?
Having gotten to know him a little bit and now
Yeah.
getting to know you.
No, we're completely different. And everything that feels natural to me is not natural to him, and vice versa. And somehow that friction has created a point of meeting where sexually, creatively, we are matched beyond anyone I've ever even met, like another couple. Like I've been with him for 20 years and we still have a creativity and an intimacy which is crazy.
Wow, that
doesn't make any sense.
That's so exciting.
It is.
It's inspiring.
It's inspiring.
Yeah.
But the thing is that when we enter that space, we both become completely fluid and we're able to follow this kind of force. It's crazy. It's like it's never the same. It's never mundane. It's never like, oh, this again. And we spend a lot of time not together. Like, I don't need him to come home. I'm not looking to know when he's coming home later today. I saw him just a minute ago. I might not see him till like tomorrow afternoon. And I'm not looking for him. But I've always been like that. So it's like he has a tremendous amount of freedom. I have a tremendous amount of freedom. And what we call it is freedom in commitment. The commitment gives us, it's a deep love that's really there. But within that commitment, we're our individual beings. Like he does not complete me and I do not complete him. And please, please don't go there because that's not happening. So what we vowed is to hold each other in love, in celebration, in support, to realize our individual highest creative expression. And we've done that in very powerful ceremony along the way, starting with a very spiritual wedding with gospel singers and channelers, and Bhagavan Das did our Vedic fire ceremony, and African wedding singers, and crazy, crazy activation. And then we've done it in different ceremonies throughout all those dismantling. And when we made it through the dismantle, we did a renewal of our vows, which I used to think was so cheesy and stupid because I would be like, oh, you had one wedding, like it's not enough. Like, you got to have another wedding. But we did it in this room with the kids, And I really recommend this to people. It's so powerful, you guys. If you're married and you have children, get married again with your kids. Because they weren't there. And so we had this, it was on our, I think, our 12th anniversary. My daughter Mathis designed my dress and both of my daughter's dresses and sewed them. And my sons, we all did something. So my son wrote a song and my other son, wrote a story. And, we had an altar made in here and it was just the six of us. And Rich read me something that literally cracked my heart. It slayed me. He literally slayed me to my knees after being with him for all those years. And it was so deep. And, after beautiful, beautiful experience, I made garlands for all of us, strung flowers for all of us. And we had, crystals and we had everything that we needed. And then we went to a restaurant afterwards and some friends joined, but it was just us, and it was remarkable. And again, the power of ceremony, the power of taking the moment. Rich and I had our 15-year anniversary of our actual wedding here in July, and we got a hotel room and we met for ceremony, and we had our crystals, and we had the feather that the shaman gave us when we had our wedding with him in Mexico, and we had certain things, and we recommitted to what are we doing in this next section of our lives. And it's a very individual commitment. It's not like I'm going to hold your hand 24/7. No, it's like, what do you want to realize in the next section? And I'm going to vow to hold you in that vision. And please hold that for me. And then we go forward.
Damn, I'm speechless. That is so epic, so inspiring. That's crazy.
Yeah.
I'm like, as you're talking, the thought that comes to my mind, I go, Luke, after the interview, ask her if she'll coach you next time you get in a relationship. Yes. I'm like, honestly, I'm just sitting here going, what? That's possible? I've not had that sort of conscious experience yet. It's had some great experiences, but not something on that level, So it's inspiring to think, wow, that's possible to have, and I'm obviously like no relationship on the planet is all unicorns and rainbows, but I think that alignment is so appealing to me, where you have two souls that are in contract with themselves and their own God, and then this third entity, as I'm sort of picturing this energetically, being the relationship, and there's a contract within that.
Yeah, and I think the thing is what the key to it is understanding that. And this is one thing that I loved about Rich that was from AA, because I was used to men trying to rescue and resolve things. Like they were like, hey, little lady, I've got it handled. Yeah. Here's how you cut a tomato. It would be like, and that was so, it felt so bad in my body. You know what I mean? Because it's really condescending. It's actually not what we want ultimately. And Rich, I was in the middle of this life transformation and a lot of pain too, coming out of this divorce. And, divorce takes a couple years any way you slice it. Like especially if you have children, like it's just not all one way. It's a very mixed bag, of a situation. And Rich would say to me, I know you're in pain, and I'm going to stand here and watch you in pain. But it's like,
it's epic.
It wasn't like, I'm going to solve it for you. And I was so relieved. I felt such a relief. I was like, oh, thank God. Like, he's not in my space. And same way, if you realize that this is a solo journey, even if you're in a relationship. So like the story that I tell about Rich and my transformation and what actually catalyzed this whole vegan lifestyle Ultraman experience that he writes about in his book and that is behind all of our cookbooks, is that in the beginning years, he's an addict. He still suffers from the affliction, from the moods, from the resentment, from all that type of stuff. And he was very paralyzed. And I was feeling like maybe I needed to bring my light in because I was too much for him. And also I was coaching him. I was like, dude, you're suffering here. Take it. And every time I reached, he would get more paralyzed. And it was very tricky to discern, very tricky to figure out. Because when I interviewed all my friends, they were like, you're so right, and he's so not right. I was like, is it reasonable that I want him to bring in a certain amount of income? Is it reasonable that I want him to eat well? Is it reasonable that he read this self-help book? And they were all like, yeah. 7 years, my relationship's not changing. It's not going anywhere. So we had one sort of defining moment where I asked him to leave for a 24-hour period. Mathis was just a baby. And during that 24 hours, I just was clear, no, I want to be with this guy. And so I had this teaching with this Indian master that I was studying with at the time. And he talked to me about divine love versus human love. And he's like, human love is simply a business arrangement. It says, if you behave a certain way and you do X, Y, and Z, and you speak to me in this manner, and you love me like I want to be loved, then I will love you. But if you fail in any of those areas, I will withdraw my love from you, right? But the sun is just consciousness, and it's divine love, and it's loving all of us, no matter what you do, no matter your addiction, no matter if you're homeless, no matter if you're Mother Teresa. It's loving you the same. It doesn't care. And for some reason, I was able to imbibe that teaching. And, it's like when you get a lesson, like ski lesson, and they tell you the same thing, and then finally the one instructor says it, and you're like, I had that moment. And I came home, and I called Rich, and I was like, I've been in your space, and I apologize. And I'm releasing you to your life in complete love. So eat what you want, do what you want, realize or don't realize, eat In-N-Out burgers, drink, do whatever you want, and I'm going to love you unconditionally. And I know he was like, what's the catch? She's going to grab me and, something's going to happen, like an ambush. But he could feel that the terrain had changed. I had looked over the fence, and once you've seen the snake that's a rope, it was over for me. So it was that act that catalyzed his moment on the stairs walking up, where he had a health scare, where he became transformed and entered into this whole life. It was that act that did it. It wasn't just the health. And
makes perfect sense.
Yeah, it was profound.
Yeah, it's so classic, especially when dealing with alcoholics. I just got to say, because I'm one, we're fucking wired different. I'm sorry, we're different animals. Mm-hmm. I've tried to wiggle out of that for all of these years, and we're weird. Mm-hmm. Not calling your husband weird, but I can call myself weird.
You guys are special.
And special. I mean weird in a good sense.
Yeah.
Like a weird song. Grateful Dead makes weird music. It's the most beautiful music ever. It's fucking weird. But it's like with an alcoholic, there's this internal defiance. Mm-hmm. Everyone has a certain degree of egoic rebelliousness, right? But there's this certain quirk of defiance with an alcoholic where if you tell them what to do, mm-hmm. they just are implored to do the opposite. And the minute you do kind of a reverse psychology thing on us, mm-hmm. and be like, hey, you know what? Just do whatever. We're like, yeah, I'll do your thing now. It's just like, Yeah. I know this because I've worked with so many alcoholics on a one-on-one basis, and you really do almost not that you were using reverse psychology in this case, but it had sort of that net effect.
Yeah, Rich describes it that he was like, wait a second, you mean she's not trying to solve me anymore? Well, then that just leaves me with me.
Right.
So now I'm going to have to face me.
Right.
Because I can't push back at her and make her the focus.
How do you in your relationship, and you might not even frame it this way, but how does the polarity work? You mentioned you still have this attraction and intimacy and sexuality that's alive and well after all of these years, which to me sounds challenging. But you're someone who's, you've got a public persona. You're being a mother, which mothering to me, and I've not had kids, but to me that can be a pretty masculine energy. You're running shit, you're controlling shit, you're protecting. There's a certain element of that sort of energy in there, and having a career and making money and being a boss and having a team is very proactive sort of yang energy, right? How do you manage the energetic polarity in your relationship when it comes to the masculine and feminine? And is that something that you two are aware of, talk about, or does it just work itself out naturally?
I'm not exactly sure of the question, but I'll just go for it.
In terms of, for two beings to be attracted, you have to have polarity, right? It's not about male or female genitals, but it's like two sameness, you just butt up against each other like batteries, right? So being someone who is powerful like you are, some of that power manifesting in the world in more of a masculine energy, how do you guys sort of dance with that, the energies of masculine and feminine?
Yeah, well, I think that...
does that make more sense when I frame it that way?
Yeah, sort of. I'll try. Let me try. I think that we are both here to maybe ignite that opposite energy within each other, right? So I think Rich is learning more about femininity, and I'm learning more about masculinity, maybe. And some of it just works its way out. But I mean, ultimately, we have both energies within us. So what we're cultivating is a connection to both things. And even with the return of the feminine and everything that's happening in this life, in this realm, both are needed. Both are within us. So I think it's a cadence. You know, sometimes we have certain knowings about each other. And so, like in the mechanics of the day to day, like there are certain things that we know work and certain things that don't. So we know things about each other. So, for instance, we don't really speak in the morning because inevitably it's going to end up in a fight if we talk in the morning. Because I'm uber sensitive. I'm coming out of, you know, my very womb-like experience. I'm very, very sensitive, and he's very irritated and like needs to get out and move his body and get, you know, like he's more in an aggro state like normally and needs to go move his body to get everything balanced. And I'm in a very soft kind of tender state. So if we try to communicate with those two dualities, it's not meeting.
Got it.
So, you know, so that's like a mechanical thing.
Sure.
You know, he sleeps in a tent outside.
I was going to get to that.
He loves freezing temperatures, and also he's extremely sensitive in a way that he needs a womb-like, almost like the tent, like the closed space of the tent. Like I want him to get a gravity blanket because I think it would do amazingly well for him. He was never a cuddler in bed. He doesn't like to be touched. If I happen to brush against him, he might like jerk violently, you know, so that's not happening in our life.
Right.
That's just not happening.
Right.
So, and because I process a lot of things in the middle of the night, many times I'm up at 4:30 a.m. doing sadhana, doing yoga, doing practices, and I like to flow in my life. And so if I have him there, then I can't, or I'm at peril of like waking him up. Mm-hmm. So it was kind of funny, but I told you we had this ceremony for our 15th year anniversary, and he'd gotten a hotel room, you know, this great hotel. And so we did this ceremony. We had this amazing time together, and it's like total love fest, just amazing. We had an amazing vegan meal. And then we come back to the room, and we're in this bed that's like kind of small. And I'm lying down, and I look at him, and I'm like, what do you think? And he goes, risky. And so I'm like, babe, I'm going to go. I'm going to go back to the kids. Anyway, I don't want to leave them. So you enjoy it, get up in the morning, you know, go for a run, like enjoy it. And so I just split. But for us, it was like such a triumph. Like I don't need to spend that time with him in that space. So a lot of it is just, I don't know, just
that's
sort of
so cool.
it out.
Yeah, it just kind of naturally works itself out. I think my question is born from my innate curiosity in that in past relationships, in a couple instances when we both, in one particular case, we had a business together and we're both in business. We're both out there like crushing it. And after a few years, it was difficult for us to sort of turn off the business partner thing.
Sure.
And so we're like bros now. Like, let's do this. Let's lay in bed and talk about money and plans. And it was like, wow, no sex happening here, you know? And so I'm just always curious, I think, about the interplay of having a family and a home and the responsibilities and how the energetic tendencies play out.
Mm-hmm.
And
so I would say...
Does that make sense?
Yeah,
I
so
mean,
in
maybe
that case, what I would say is that just like everything, just like every creative project in your life, it's a garden, it's a virtual garden, your relationship. If you do not tend to it properly, it will not grow, it will not fruition. And so within our busy lives, we have date times.
there we go.
We have scheduled times together. This is the moment where we're doing this. And during that time, no business, no talking about that, no discussing, no kids, no. So we have to actually make the moment to cultivate. And with me, I want my time with Rich to be memorable. So I would rather see him not at all for, 10 days or in passing, and have one meeting at a hotel room with a ceremony with some magic that is meaningful, where we actually committed to something that was deeper, and then we go back to whatever we're doing. So what we do as parents, and you'll find this out if you ever have kids or anybody watching, if you make your life all about your kids, and which I'm devoted to my kids, and my kids are my deepest gurus, and what a blessing and what a ass kicker and what an amazing experience. However, I have always carved out time for the mama and daddy, or for the two partners, because that is the core, and your children need that unit together. So as parents, sometimes we think we're doing the highest for our kids by not doing the self-care thing or not spending time with our partner because, well, Johnny had a whatever. No, you have to be smart and cultivate that time for yourself, because that's the core relationship that is holding the field for the other family members.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's sort of, it brings to mind this tendency that some parents have when a relationship is clearly over, of staying, quote unquote, staying together for the kids, even though there's tension and animosity within the home. I never, and I'm no expert on parenting or relationships by any stretch, but that never sounds like a good idea to me, because the container that those kids are in is broken. It doesn't have that sort of foundation that's created from the partnership.
And just to say that there are many organizations of life, so nothing's an absolute. So there could be a situation where it actually was beautiful, and that's great. But what I would say is, if we as parents think that we're keeping things from our children, we think we're hiding things from our children, we are in big illusion.
Right.
So either they know consciously or they know they know it. Okay?
Right.
So I used to have a friend who cheated on her husband outwardly. And this is a hard point of us to connect. But she would bring men that she was in relationship with around her kids with the awareness that they had no idea.
Right.
And I was like, you're completely in denial. They know.
Yeah.
Like, it's like thoughts are things, energies are things. People know. You can know. You don't have to say it outwardly. So this is another way, as far as living your life. One of my great awarenesses that has helped me connect with my kids in a very deep way is by being very honest about my life. So I have been very honest about my drug use, about my promiscuity, about my ills, my pains, things that have happened in my life, because I think as parents, we think we're supposed to portray this perception, this persona of perfection to your child. So they're like, oh, you're the perfect parent. But what we've forgotten is that humanity is deeply flawed. And so your child is dealing with their own inner turmoil of reconciliation of the human condition, whether it's from their own experience or whether it's from the collective, just the collective. And so when we portray this facade of perfection, of like, I've got it all handled, and I've never done anything wrong, and I always tell the truth, and I've never used, and I've always done this, what it does is it creates a separation from the child to the parent. And I know in my own case, when I told my oldest son at like age 10, we had like a sex conversation over dinner, over a lunch, he asked to borrow my credit card and went in a flower store and bought me a bouquet of flowers at age 10. And when I told him that I had used drugs and I told him the reality of drug, they sighed a relief and they said, oh, I'm so relieved. They said the words, Mom, I'm so relieved. I'm so relieved. Because they had another scenario going on at school, and they were trying to bridge the gap. So trust me, like, I live a spiritual life. I live a holistic life. I'm not into like doing drugs with my kids. Like, I don't do that anymore, but we can't be sneaking Dove bars at night and then telling our kids to live plant-based. It's like they're just too smart.
Yeah.
So if you do that,
because they're not kids, they're souls that have been here a zillion times.
Exactly.
They're looking at you like, oh, seriously? You think I don't know you're smoking cigarettes in the garage, Dad?
Yes, they know. And thank you for saying that. And I would say probably, people ask me like, what is Cookie's like? She's like, stop telling me to be quiet. She's fine. But you touched on something that's super powerful, I think, and that is that, people ask me, well, what is your secret with raising your kids, and how did you cultivate this relationship with them? And I think it's that I always knew they were vast souls. I never regarded them as just a kid from the time they were babies, because I knew it. And also, it's important to note that your kids will reject you at some point, because it is absolutely necessary. And it's tragic and hilarious at one, because you're like, your kid is rejecting everything that you've stood for. And then you're like, dude, what are you doing? Like, we've had this thing. Like, it's been going on for 20 years. Like, what do you mean? And they're just like, no, you're completely irrelevant. Like, everything you've said,
Is it not wired into kids that nature designed them to become independent and just reject you?
They have to separate to find themselves in order to do it. And it's really painful. I mean, I'll make, my boys moved out very late at age like 20 and 21, or 22 and 23. They moved to Los Feliz, like 45 minutes away. And I cried the entire month before they left and didn't even hold it in. I was like, you guys, I'm not even going to hold it in. I'm just going to break down in your arms.
Just going to lose your shit.
Yeah. And it was because we had shared this amazing thing. We were very close for a very long time. And now I need to let them go. And it's a practice. I look down and it's like, we played gigs together. We, rehearsed together. We recorded together. Like, I wasn't just a mom to them. It was more than that. But, it's necessary.
When it comes to showing your truth to your kids and being real with them, where's the line of boundaries and enmeshment?
Well, again,
I experienced the extreme version of what you just described of
inappropriate.
Yeah, of just things that I wasn't ready to hear.
You're
I didn't.
Like, hey, please.
TMI. Like I experienced a lot of TMI as a kid, and it was psychologically actually damaging to me. I mean, fences have been mended, and all is forgiven, and all is well. And my parents were 27 when they had me. They
didn't know.
Oh my God! If I would have had a kid at 27, I would have probably dropped him in the first week on the. I mean, it's just I get it. But it's something, a lot of undoing has had to happen because there were not boundaries and confines of what any sense of normalcy in that.
Well, again, I think
respect.
It's discernment. And I think as parents, we're going to all make mistakes. And even if it wasn't a mistake in the time that it happened, then it will become a mistake to the kids later as they're trying to unravel it. Like in my memoir, I have this idea that I'm, going to write, like, this is my perception of my life. Like, I don't expect anybody else to have had the same experience that I have, because we're all looking at it through our own lens, for what it was, the meaning that it was to me, that my life took it up and made meaning out of it. So again, I think it's discernment, and every child is different. So my boys were very mature. They were, they had an intellectual maturity of probably 17-year-old at age 10, so it was appropriate for them. They could grab all those elements and they could process it. Whereas, my other daughter, actually we've had genius. She's 14. We just had a hike yesterday and we talked all about drugs, we've been talking about drugs ad nauseum, everything about them and how they feel and what are the pros and what are the cons, if there's any pros. But
I would say as a former drug addict, there's pros.
There's pros. So, but
for a while.
I've been in this dialogue with her, and I'm just grateful for the dialogue.
That's cool.
And there's a lot more cussing. I don't want to hear it. There's a lot more, nasty talk, whatever. I mean, they're completely potty mouth, completely out of control at that age.
Yeah.
But you have to let them do that, in order to. And she's awesome. She just got into an amazing art school, on her own. She worked on a portfolio for a year and a half. She got into age 14. She's going to 4-year art school, full time, starting next month.
Wow, cool.
As a painter, and
that's cool.
She's self-advocating. She's totally responsible. She's driving me crazy. She literally is, she's gone already. She's 14 and she's gone. She might as well be 18. So, but I'm proud of that. I mean, that's what we want. And then my other daughter, Jaya, she's much more conservative. She'll cover her eyes if she sees something that's not okay for her. So, I've had less dialogue with her in those areas. So you have to know your audience.
Right. Know your audience. It's well stated. Yeah. I think it's something I've worked on in my adult life because I'm just super raw and real. And I think at times I've been unconscious of the fact that I've made people uncomfortable in the way that I just share everything and that I swear so much and things like that. And it's been a lesson I've had to learn to have a little more discernment about when and with whom I'm sharing what. So that's
I like your openness.
Thank you.
And your cussing as well.
Well,
so
fucking A.
Fuck you.
Thank you. That's great. Well, it's funny doing the podcast. I'm always a bit torn because I have received at times, and I of course magnify any criticism of the work that I'm doing a million times because I'm just that way. But a few people over the past couple of years have said, hey, your swearing is really offensive, or I can't listen to the show around my kids. And so I'm always trying to edit myself because I want to be respectful. But it is also just the way I talk, and it's difficult to be something other than myself.
And I would say, and you shouldn't.
I mean, it's
anything other than yourself.
It's a fine line, you don't want, I mean, I think what it comes from too is years ago, my dad, who I have so much love and respect for him, he's just such a stellar guy, just my hero. And my dad came to me a few years ago. He's been happily married to his third wife now for 18 years.
Nice.
That's not my mom, obviously. And he came to me, he said, Luke, can I talk to you? I said, yeah. He said, well, I want to take responsibility that all through your childhood, I swore like a sailor. I know that's the way I've always talked. I was allowed to swear when I was a kid and do all kinds of crazy stuff. And he said, so I'm taking responsibility for that, but I'm in this new relationship. And May, his wife, she's somewhat more conservative than I think people you're used to being around. And it really bothers her when you swear, and it's really offensive to her and makes her feel really uncomfortable. So I'm going to request, not demand, but I'm going to request that when you're in her presence and my presence, if you could not swear. And I was like, respect, cool. I don't want to make anyone uncomfortable or feel bad or offend them. And then he shared something with me. He said, he's probably in his late 60s at that point. He said, in all those years that you saw me speaking that way, I didn't know it, but I was really damaging a lot of my relationships, especially many of my professional relationships at that time, because I had no idea that I was offending other people. And then people that I had interacted with and done business with for years later came to me and said, wow, I always felt it was so disrespectful the way that you spoke and things like that. In other words, it had hindered his ability to foster relationships, and he had harmed people in some degree by using that kind of language. And for some reason, that brief conversation always stuck with me. And I was like, just because I'm not offended by any type of, you could call me anything. And I'm like, whatever, it's just words. But some people are
super offended.
Yeah, they're offended and bothered by language, so.
What's your most frequently used cuss word?
Probably fuck. I say fucking this, fucking that a lot.
Fuck is a great word.
I mean, it's just,
listen,
how do you, then I saw a Tony Robbins event a few months ago.
He said fuck.
Oh, constantly. He's like, yeah, and these motherfuckers are doing great. I was like, what? There's 12,000 people in this stadium. They're cheering. They're eating it up. And a lot of them are Christian and whatever. And then I was very confused because I thought, okay, he's using it for impact and he's just being authentic. That's obviously the way he speaks. So I was like, oh, now I'm really screwed because I'm trying to be high vibe and not offend people and be authentic at the same time. And eventually I don't know what the answer is.
What would have been great would have been if you'd gotten really judgmental to Tony Robbins about the fact that
yeah, right.
No, but can I ask you, have you seen the presentation by Osho on the word fuck?
No. I'm fascinated.
Okay.
Oh, this is going to go in the show notes.
You got to go in the show notes.
Yeah.
Okay. This is one of the most brilliant pieces of video film that I've ever seen. It's literally so hilarious. He basically goes into that word and explains it on every single realm. And it's absolutely hilarious on every level.
I'm feeling this might validate my further use of the word.
I think so. I mean, if I was going to tell you, I just think that, first of all, I've been with you for a couple hours, and I think you've used it twice, and I've used it maybe twice. Of course, I'm just like you, so we're vibing together.
Right.
It's also a great group of the population that we are being the way showers for are the youth, a lot younger than we are.
Yeah.
And
I forget that sometimes.
And I get messages like, it made me so relieved that you used that word because I could understand your humanity and not, I think sometimes when you're talking about spiritual issues or whatever, people tend to separate, provide that separation between you and someone, and so it actually drew together like, oh, you're very human. in a way.
I've gotten that a lot too. And actually, the more real, authentic, and forthright I've been in my delivery, whether I'm interviewing others or being interviewed, the more positive responses I get from people.
Yeah.
So as I said, I just magnify the couple critiques out of 300 people that said, "Oh my God, you're so real and so awesome. You're raw and I love it." The 2 people that were like, "I'm offended." Those are the ones my mind focuses on.
Of course.
I'm just that way, So, okay,
I
cool.
didn't find it offensive at all. I don't think you have a problem with it. I don't think you have Tourette's or
I don't think so
that.
either.
I think you're a pretty feeling sensitive being. And thanks for offering that. And I'll also do a little observation of my use of the word. Make sure that you use it for impact, but include that Osho piece.
I'm on it. Yeah. I think part of it too is I have this inherent sense of paranoia now because of the PC culture that is so prevalent, that things I just grew up saying that had no meaning and the context of them was just in passing and just having fun now are a thing that you can be ostracized for online and like lose your quote unquote audience, or i.e. your revenue streams. And it's like, oh my God, I feel like there's someone watching all the time, and you have to be so careful not to offend people because there's this, I don't know, a generational or a cultural phenomenon where people internalize words now, and there's this sort of Orwellian Marxist thought policing happening that one side of me is afraid of it and the other side's like, I'm going to be worse than ever now. Like, I'm just going to rebel against that and just offend everyone across the board because it pisses me off so much that we're being that manipulated.
We're being edited at that level.
Yeah.
I mean,
it's offensive. I find it offensive to be edited.
So listen
So I don't know.
To my children, my daughter was really into Japan and anime like a couple years ago. And so I drove them to the 99-cent Japanese store that's on Sawtelle.
Oh, yeah, that place is dope. Yeah.
So we went in there and they each had $20 and they went crazy and bought like the coolest stuff. And it was really fun. And then I said, they bought some candy, which I let them buy, which I never do, but because it's packaged in like Japanese packaging, which is so brilliant. Like, it's just cool.
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, you can have that. And we were going to have dinner. And so I said to my daughter and her friends, I said, we don't have time to have dinner because I have to drive back an hour. But I said, you guys can sit in the back and eat the Japanese candy. And then they go, Mom, you're so racist. And I said, what are you talking about? And
oh, my God.
You're so racist. I mean, you called the candy Japanese.
Oh, my God.
And I was like, that's what it is. I said, it's Japanese candy. Yeah, I know, Mom, but you're so racist. And I was just like, oh, my goodness. Like, this is where we're at.
That's what I'm talking about.
Right?
This makes me want to punch a wall. Honestly, I find that so irritating. And that's the thing. So it's finding the balance. But at the same time, I actually care about people and I don't want to hurt people's feelings.
Of course.
But I'm sorry, but there's male bodies and female bodies, and there's just basic fundamental facts that exist in nature, such as some candy that's made in Japan. It's fucking Japanese candy. I'm sorry, you know what I mean? It's like
it's not racist. Like, that's what it is. That's the quality of what it is.
But isn't that interesting that your children have been indoctrinated through media and through our culture to latch on to these thought forms that have no basis in reality?
No, and now my daughter and I had this conversation yesterday. She's really into rap. We saw an amazing movie, Blind Spotting.
Oh, don't know it.
Oh, my goodness. It's Utkarsh, Rich's recent podcast guest and friend, has like a beautiful set piece in it. And most of the actors are from Hamilton. And it's a beautiful movie on racism. It's so well done. I was so happy to see a good piece of art, that's really compelling. So afterwards, we were talking about race, and we were talking about the use of certain words and like who, when is it okay? And I said, is it still the right thing for me to refer to people of color as African American? Because when I grew up, it was black, but then there became a moment where you could no longer say black. I had to say African American. And now my daughter's like, no, you say black. Like, it's so racist.
Oh, it's come back around.
Yeah, now it's like racist to say African American.
That's good, because I just call people the black guy, the white guy, maybe the Latin guy, the Asian guy. I think those are your things.
Yeah.
And I guess I would say, Indian if they were from India, or
You're so racist.
probably Native American if they were Native American Indian, because I don't want to confuse someone in the conversation. I have to explain that it's American Indian, not Eastern Indian. Anyway,
So you see, it's a moving target.
well, and what's absurd about it is, oh God, this is with all this like identity politics, is that you're not even a woman sitting in front of me, to me. Like when I look in your eyes, there's no fucking woman. There's an itness, right? Let alone the pigmentation of your skin. Like everyone's so caught up in this shit.
Yeah.
It's like almost a perpetuation of racism just to be so obsessed on racism. It's like, how about we just fucking leave the whole thing out, and each person is just a spiritual entity using some different colored, different gendered body part thingy to meander around the physical plane. You know, I'm not even in that headspace.
And maybe this leads us back kind of full circle, and this is the work, or this is the opportunity of us, is to go into these isms that have been implanted in our field, like me with blonde person,
Right.
and say, okay, I rescind from that program. I am going to identify those belief systems that exist in me that don't even belong to me, because I see everybody as a beautiful emanation of spirit. So let me disconnect from that, and let me just meet you in equality, in celebration, in beauty, in reverence for the fact that you're alive. How amazing. You're an aspect of God. What can you teach me? Show me your brilliance. But that, again, that's a level of us saying no. Saying, no, we're not going to do that. We're just not going to be that knee-jerk, controlled person, because that's someone put that ism in the culture.
Well, it sounds like you've done that with parenting. As you're saying, you don't view your kid as a kid or your kid as a possession, but as this entity that's come through these lifetimes and is time traveling, and boop, happen to show up inside your body and come out and say, hey, I'm here. I'm on a journey. You're part of it because you brought me here. But the obligation is almost, to each of our own experience than it is, the expression that our body takes, or our position in a family or something. So I love thinking way zoomed out and globally like that. It makes the world make much more sense to me. A couple things I want to cover. So speaking of how we identify ourselves and how we view someone based on external rather than what's going on internally, you've got this spiritual name, SriMati, right?
Yeah.
And at one point, I emailed into the Kundalini Center World Headquarters.
What is his name?
For me, and I gave them my birth date and time,
right.
and they gave me back my spiritual name. I thought, the really dope Yogi Bhajan authorized woman that does it was still alive. My teacher Tay just said, she's really old. If you're going to get your name, do it now, even if you don't use it. And I've never been called to refer to myself as anything other than my name, but many people have. And so you sometimes use your given name and sometimes use your spiritual name. And then in doing my research on you, as you can tell that I've done, you were given the spiritual name by a teacher, and then this teacher wanted you to legally change your name, and you sort of defied the tradition of that name-giving ceremony and said, no, I'm just going to use it when I feel like it. Who gave you the name? What relevance does it hold for you? And why do you not go by that all the time?
Okay, beautiful. So I had a breakup with my first spiritual teacher that I referred to earlier. And the way that Divine Mother brought it to me was in a very violent way. So it's like sorry, it looks like my children are on the roof right now for some reason.
It's all good.
So anyway, I'd had a break with this teacher who was not in Indian traditions. And it was, I was in a very, very dark place. I felt completely isolated, unable to process this split or this pain with anyone, because I didn't really know anyone else who had had a breakup with their guru that was basically, I had been served a legal summons. Like, it was really not cool at all. And I was getting a very profound lesson in giving my power away, because I had wanted to be I was a very ambitious, devoted student. And I had done my best to serve this master, and then he turned on me.
I've had that same experience.
Okay, so cool. So as a result, I ended up meeting this Indian master. I'm going to maybe leave him nameless for this, just because I think it's better. So I I met him actually at the Hindu temple, which was right near my house. I wasn't going to go. A friend of mine was like, will you take me there? I want to do a homa, which is like a fire ceremony. So I went there and met this master. And when he was speaking, I knew I was meeting a master because I could feel the words just penetrating my body. And I was like, oh. I was in like brown corduroys and like a Malibu sweatshirt, completely... just completely, casualed out, not in the outfit or anything like that. And then I signed up for a workshop with him, and I guess on some forum I had checked that I wanted a spiritual name, but I forgot about it. So I was in the audience, and all of a sudden they were like, okay, we're going to call up a certain people who are getting spiritual names, and they called my name, and I was kind of like shocked. Well, what he explained to us is that the spiritual name has 3 aspects. He meditates on the being of who you are. It's your path to enlightenment, and it is also your goal of enlightenment if there is a goal. So it's the being of who you are, your path of your journey, and your destination, all of it. Well, I had been studying this very heady, cerebral practice of past life regression, of information, of occult information, of theosophy, like very old. It was like a dusty, musty book from the libraries of London, like you could blow on it and the dust would go. And I was getting very bogged down by it. Like my body was saying, I just want to be, I just want to be, I just want to be. And there was all this talking and no experiential, not little experiential, experience. And so there were 3 paths in this tradition. One was Ananda, which was bliss. One was, I think, Prema, which was intellectual. It might have been karma service. And the third was like a karma service, something like that. And so I was in line, just in my head thinking like, I want to be such a good student. Like, I wonder if he's going to give me a life of intellectual pursuit, or I wonder if he's going to give me a life of karma service, And I went up and I kneeled before him, and he looked me in the eye and he said, your name is Ma Ananda SriMati, which means blissful, beautiful, and fortunate. Now be that. And at that moment, it was a transcendent experience. It was like 10,000 bricks fell off my back. And I was reminded that I am an artist. That's who I am. That is my divine work. I don't need to become an intellectual or become a scientist or go be Mother Teresa in order to verify and validate who I am. And so I was liberated in that moment to a great degree. And this name is a very beautiful name for me because of this reason. Also because one of my most beloved Indian energies is Ma Anandamoy Ma, and which she is she's Sri Ma Anandamoy Ma. We have almost the same syllables in our names, and she's a revered Indian consciousness that was born realized, absolutely breathtaking being. Like when I saw pictures of her, I almost fell on my knees. Like she is beauty embodied, literally beauty embodied. So I collected this name with reverence, and because I went through that deep dismantle, and also in this separation from this teacher is where I found my music. I started to make sounds with this harmonium, and suddenly the song started writing me. I wasn't trying to write music. I was totally disconnected from that, even though I had been a singer when I was 6 and knew that I was. So I said that I would use that name to represent my artistic offerings out of devotion to that experience. So in the aftermath of that experience, the devotees, what happened is in his organization, a lot of people started asking for spiritual names. And a lot of people were not sincere. They wanted it like a new bag, a new Prada bag or something like that. And so some of my friends, they were like, wow, that's such an incredible name. So they signed up for the next meditation retreat and they asked for a spiritual name. And when he named them American names like Allison, Pamela, Tracy, It was a hilarious.
Because he sensed the motive wasn't
Yeah, because the
sincere.
motive, they didn't
Right.
really, and then they were like, what? Like, you got Ma Nanda SriMati, and I
Your
got
name's
like,
dope.
I got like
You got a good one.
Allison. I got a good one.
Yeah.
So that's kind of why, and I've shortened it to SriMati because it's so hard for people to even grab that.
Totally.
And, like my good friends call me Shri Mum, Shri Ma, just kind of like that. But it's a beautiful name that reminds me that I have permission to just be in beauty and just be that.
That's cool. I love that. Yeah, I think that in some cases, perhaps people, and maybe like the ladies that got the the American names that got dissed on that. I think sometimes in an effort to lose identification with the false personality of Joe Smith, Jane Smith, that some seekers will take on a spiritual name and then thus also just create a new identity that's this sort of egoic spirit, this spiritual ego kind of in that name, and take on this sense of specialness, and this is not something I've experienced, but have experienced observing people in the spiritual communities for some time, because there's that whole trap, that allure of the specialness and having a special name and special dress and stuff. When any of your gurus sing, I asked them about that. I said, what's with, the spiritual costumes that people like you wear? What's up with that? Is that another trap? And he's
Right.
like, Guru Singh was amazing. He said, no, man, I just like to do a lot of yoga and this clothing's comfortable. It's like, okay, cool. I'll take that answer. But
Can we just talk about his impeccable design?
I mean,
come on.
Yeah,
he is color coded, like classy, amazing garb.
You can't really mess with Guru
can't
Singh's
mess with
wardrobe
G-Singh.
choices. But
No,
I was getting at,
Yeah, I get it.
the false gurus in the orange robes and all the flowers and the pedestal they sit on, and that whole kind of astral circus that's common in some spiritual circles.
Yeah, and it's important, and I do want to share this. Two things that getting the spiritual name was transformative for me, and part of it is that it takes a lot of courage to change your name, and it's weird, and it's it's bizarre, it's weird, and at least I legit was named that by somebody. I didn't just go, okay, now call me Sunshine, or whatever it is, which actually would be fine, but it takes courage to do that. It's odd, it's weird. But then what happened in his organization, then he changed the rule after he'd given it to me, and because he wanted to make sure people were really dedicated. So he said that if you got a spiritual name, you had to change it legally. It was a requirement. So the devotees called me and they said, Julie, you have to change your name to Ananda SriMati. And I said, no, I don't. I said, I'm not changing my name. I said that those were not the terms that I entered into the agreement. And furthermore, that naming ceremony that happened between us changed me forever. And it was between me and Divine Mother sourcing through him. He can't take it away from me.
Right.
He can never take it away from me because
Right.
it happened. And no, I'm not changing my name. And so they were like, well, what about Julie? And he was like, Julie can do whatever she wants. So I share that not to say, just to show people that the guru meets you where you need to learn the lesson. So my first teacher took my power away because I needed to learn about giving my power away. The second guru that I had was him. And every time I told him I channeled this beautiful song after doing the meditation you taught me, he would say, beautiful, now drop me. Every single time, drop me. He never fostered a connection with him because I was at a different stage of my evolution. And one experience which was really profound was, we would go in line for darshan and he would dance and he turned into this beautiful, literally goddess, man, woman, I don't know what. It was crazy what he used to embody. And I would always go in line and my human mind would be thinking, does he know that he was with me in the astral last night? Does he know we had this exchange? Does he remember me from last week? What did he think of the note that I sent him? Did he like my song? I'd be thinking all these things. And then one day I was in line for darshan and I was just empty. There was nothing there. And when I got in front of him, he literally grabbed me, put me in his arms and rocked me like a baby, laughing his head off. Everybody was just, their mouths were open. They were looking, because the guru doesn't usually touch, the devotee. And it was as if he snatched me when I wasn't looking. And what I realized is all those times I had come to him with all my bullshit that was between me and him. It was like between me and God. And I had all my preconceived ideas and everything else. And when I was empty, he just grabbed me and gave me this magnificent blessing. And so really this teacher was the most profound. This was the teacher that was the channel that catalyzed everything that has put Rich in my life into the space that it is. And since that time, he has been accused of all kinds of colorful things, and that's a whole nother story. And all I have is my personal experience with him, and that is what it is.
Wow.
So he's already been through many different incarnations. Doesn't even look like the same being as the being that I was with.
Wow, interesting.
It's profound.
That's very cool.
Yeah, it's really cool.
I love stories about mystics. That's what first really drew me to those types of teachings when I was, right before I was sober. My dad's side of the family, they were going and staying at the ashram of Satya Sai Baba, with the big fro and the orange robe.
Goodness.
Who also, after he passed, all these weird rumors came out about him too. I think it's it's the part of the guru trip.
Exactly.
But they would go over there and have these miraculous experiences and come back and tell me, and I'm addicted to crack and heroin and just like about to die. And they'd say, oh, he manifested this ring for me. It just came out of his hand. And I mean, I was just so fascinated by all that. I think beginning when I was 9, my mom took me to see Muktananda at his ashram in Oakland. Yeah, it was a very, very auspicious moment.
That is auspicious.
Yeah, it was really cool. And I mean, I was just enamored with his whole thing, even at 8 or 9. I mean, it was just like whatever was going on in that room with the incense and the bare feet and that dude in his red hat and the whole thing was just fantastic. So years later, I started, picking up the books and looking into that. And I've always just been fascinated, particularly with the saints of India. And I just find it so strange that they all come from that continent at this point in human history for the past few thousand years. They don't seem to stop. I mean, I went and saw this guy Sri M speak a couple years ago, and it was that thing you described where the wind just blows through you. And I was like, that is a powerful entity right there. And I've seen all the fake gurus, well, not all of them, but many of them. And I've been into this shit for a long time. And that country, it's just so weird. It keeps producing these just fantastic beings. It's so strange. And having gone there and spent some time there and seen some sort of like sideshow shyster gurus that are like pretending they're a thing. They have a fake little ashram and they're not the real thing. And you sense that immediately. And then some ones that don't have an ashram and don't have the clothes, and you just look in their eyes and you're taken away to this faraway place. It's just such a fascinating thing. And so I love stories like that. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah.
So, okay, so let me see here. I think I'm coming to the place where I feel like I can let you go soon. I had so much stuff I wanted to discuss with you. And it's interesting because I don't know that much. I mean, I do some research on everyone that I interview, but we've not spent a lot of time together. I think there's the brief time I spent with you on the panel at Whitma. You were way down there. You had a big hat on. And when I asked the questions that I asked on that panel, which were pretty deep questions, what is God to you? How do you talk to God? They were very direct questions about inner spiritual experience. And you were just so confident and so sort of brazen with your answers, but at the same time intimate and soft. I just thought, man, I gotta share her with the world for those that haven't heard.
Thank you.
But I don't want to leave here and not have. Oh, I know. Okay, I know what I wanted to go back to. I want to jump back to the relationship piece because I'm just fascinated by what you guys have going on, especially now knowing a little bit more intimately how that works. But you mentioned your ability to resolve conflicts quickly. What basic tools do you and your husband use to resolve issues when they do arise?
Well, I think that, again, we have a deep commitment, and the true desire of each one of us is to resolve the conflict.
Not to be right?
Yeah, not to be right. So we know better that that we can be right or we can be happy. We can have a happy marriage.
Totally, yeah.
So, but within that, I think each of us have the ability to take responsibility, for our own experience. And also I think, Rich really with the programming, with the 12-step, it really gives him an ability. Like, he really cares. We're not here to wound each other. We're not here to leave the other person with something harmful. So we resolve it. We don't leave each other like out in the sea hurting. Like, that's not the point. So I think that there's very honest communication that can be very painful and very direct and very confronting. But there's a safety in that. Like, we feel safe enough to say those things and then, either disagree or agree or create a new format in which to begin again. And I think the other really key thing is that it's the immediate forgiveness. We are not carrying a bank account of tallying going forward. So if I say I'm sorry and I accept this responsibility and I am vowing to shift the way I enter into the energetic makeup, should it be encountered again, the goal is, like, I am his greatest advocate. He is my most cherished beloved. And so my goal is to serve him. My goal is not to be right. My goal is to serve him. And so if he's saying, I need it this way, I'm like, yes, my love. Yes, my love. And if I'm like, when you do that, like, I seriously, like, it is not good. He's like, I am sorry. I will reflect on that. I will shift my behavior next time. And he seriously does it. So I've been in a relationship where someone's just like, well, screw off, see ya. It's easy for us to do that. It's a lot harder to go, okay, because the question isn't whether you're right or not. The question is, you have these two different energies that are trying to interact, and how can each energy be the most supportive to the other? And looking at what is right instead of looking at what is wrong. Like, if you talk about Christ energy in action, not Christ as a Christian, but Christ as Jesus Christ, the being who brought these principles and held this vibration for planet Earth of compassion, of love, of goodness, for all. What is Christ's principle? It's holding somebody in that vision while they work out getting there, like, so they can vibrate up to it. But I can sit here all day and talk about everything that's wrong with Luke, and I'm not in Christ's service. I'm in fact creating to the downfall of you. I'm in fact in a satanic, it's actually the Antichrist. For me to always see what's wrong is not Christ's behavior. So if I'm your partner and you're my beloved, and I'm your, you're my most cherished, romantic liaison or, love, I'm going to hold you there. No, Luke is a beautiful emanation of God. And he may have experienced this situation because he was feeling his edges, but he's coming here. He's coming here. And then that's where the connect. And of course, as parents or as a mother, you do that with your kids all the time. I mean, I'm a fierce guardian of my kids. So if you can apply that to your partner, you're going to be right a lot less, but you're going to be really happy.
God, being right is painful. The price you have to pay to get that little juice out of, like, I won the argument. Oh, right. God, so short-lived. Mm-hmm. That's brilliant and beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. Uh-uh. And what are you mentioned the container that you have in your relationship and your commitment to one another, and that you both are very interdependent and you go off and travel and live your own lives and don't see each other for days on end. What are your views in terms of commitment and exclusivity with monogamy and polygamy and all of this stuff? We live in a very sex positive culture now in many ways, and I've explored all the different I think, configurations of relationship. I've finally settled on what I think my vision is for my highest good. Where are you guys with that?
We are completely monogamous, always have been. And in my experience, sexual energy is spiritual energy, is creative energy. It's all the same. It's a very precious, coveted, powerful energy. And again, not something that I want to be careless with. So I don't feel that anything goes is really the highest. I'm sure for some life forms that might work for somebody, but I would say it's not been my experience. So I think sexual energy entered into in a sacred way, which there is a lot of work, a lot of room for us to come online in this way. But it is the most precious thing you can experience. And so if it's the most powerful, precious, delicate, refined, magnificent, finest energetic that you could share, who are you sharing it with? When you share it, there is a karmic tie-up of energy. So it's not nothing. It's actually a lot of something.
Is it ever?
And when you're doing it careless, you're just literally, and many of us have entity attachments in the sexual energetic makeup. And that is what is leading, like the whole sexual play is just low vibe. And, I'm not a prude. I'm totally into sexuality. Like but I'm ready for a higher expression of it. I'm ready to bring back the finer aspects of this spiritual expression that can be passionate and torrid and all of those things that are beautiful, about it. However, entered into with intention with what we did, guarded as your most sacred energy, and understanding that when we participate in pornography at any level, we are perpetuating violence against the children on our planet. And that is just the truth. There is a massive, massive billion-dollar energy of sexual predators on this planet. We don't even know the half of it, of what's going on underneath our noses. This is not the divine vision for our children. So if you're somebody who's like, I need pornography because that's what I need, you are perpetuating that experience for the children of planet Earth. And these children deserve more. They deserve more from us. It's just, it always kind of made me giggle that for 99% of humanity, I think, the highest experience is to get off with a human orgasm that lasts, a minute or something like that. I'm just like, no. Not that it's awesome, yay. But I mean, come on, man. Like, we can use that. And part of like my own work is like, by having that experience, if you enter into it in a ceremonial way at that moment of climax, you can draw that energy back up into your heart and release it into your head and expand it. It's like, bring it up. Like, we don't need for it to be down here. We need it up. We need to use that up to open these channels so that we can expand. And I find that another, I think, reason that sexuality is so out of balance is we are suppressed creatively. Because in my own experience, my own boys, they were musicians at a very young age, and they were prolifically writing and playing music all day. And they never went through any need, any pursuit, anything like that at that age. And, maybe if we were more creatively expressed, we wouldn't be looking to fulfill it in that way, especially with people that don't care for us, that don't have a high vibration, and I think it's a very, very precious, intimate experience. It's so not nothing. So when I was raised, it was like, Cosmo, anything goes, and, women should just be free. And it just never resonated with me. It's just not light at all. There's nothing light about it.
It took me a long time to get there, to have the experience that this is not light and it's not just nothing, and that I have to have a really high degree of, again, that discernment and prudence about how I'm spending that energy. It took me a long ass time. And I always used to think that it was just women that were sensitive to it. Because I seemed to have impunity. It's like,
you had no reaction.
I ran rampant. It's just like, as long as I was honest and forthright and wasn't being manipulative, or, just if I wasn't being unconscious and just being a dick, I could pretty much do what I want. We're in agreement here, right? We know what this is. Cool. And I was unscathed, so I thought, for a long time. And then I think, honestly, through a lot of Kundalini yoga, that energy that you're talking about moved up, and my heart opened and my mind expanded, and all of a sudden, and just maybe just some maturity too, that just happens, I guess, eventually by natural evolution. But I started to have that experience where it couldn't just be nothing, and it just became so not interested in trying to have a more shallow experience. So I appreciate your perspective, and I'm so right there, and I believe that is absolutely true, and that any human being that's in the process of evolution consciously is eventually going to get where you just is going to arrive at what you just described. I think that's a mature way to integrate that part of yourself in a way that serves your evolution rather than stifling it, which it did for me. I mean, I'm like, oh my God, if I would have had now the way that I view pornography, and again, I'm not a prude either. I've had a wild ass life sexually. I mean, anyone that knows me personally knows I've been very free.
Everybody's commenting.
Yeah. I've been probably too free, and I apologize to anyone I was too free with. But pornography, oh my God, and I want to take credit, but I have been kind of the forerunner with all of my group of friends that are in their 30s and 40s, and we're all off pornography.
That's so cool.
Like, none of my guy friends do it, because we talk about these things, and we're all in recovery in one way or another, and it's just, again, not a moral thing, a judgment thing. 'Cause I used to work in the sex industry. I mean, I get it, no judgment, but energetically, it's so fucked up.
It's low vibe.
It just is. I'm sorry. For me, it doesn't work for me. And all of my male friends that are in relationships, marriages, it's just been the best thing ever for their relationships to get off it. My couple of friends that are single still, they swear by, I guess you could say porn sobriety, or I don't even, that doesn't have a name. Abstinence. Yeah. We're just, all of us are like, ew, no, done.
Yeah,
it's just over. And I've been it's 15 months now. It's taken me 20 years of weaning off of it, because even back in the day, I knew this makes me feel gross.
Right. Yeah.
But I still was getting that relief out of it as medicine. The dopamine hit. And so it took me a long time to where I could say 100% unequivocally under a lie detector test that I do not engage with it.
Right.
Not for moral reasons, but just, oh my God, the sense of freedom. Like I was saying earlier, with being out of debt and just changing my relationship to money and cash flow and abundance, and changing my relationship with pornography and sexuality in general. It's just, oh my God, I live in a different world.
Yeah.
Not being driven by that in any way. It's just, oh my God, I can't believe the sense of emotional balance that I have, and mental balance, and self-love and respect, and being able to just hold my head high. And I don't know, there's a weird thing guys get, and I've talked to many men. When you use porn, it does something, the shamey, weird thing to you, where the next day, I've tracked this for years, because I feel weird and I go, I don't feel good. And then I go, oh, it's because I used that shit. And it's like, we always talk about, you'll go into Starbucks or something, there's a cute girl, and you can't look her in the eyes. You feel all weird and you can't put your finger on it. It's just, you've been invaded by this toxic, creepy energy. It's
cool.
Just horrible.
How
yeah,
cool
I feel
that you're in touch with it.
I feel so stoked.
It's so beautiful.
And you enunciated it and framed it in such a beautiful way. So thank you. I think there's a lot of value in that. And again, a topic that, I would have never talked about this 2 years ago in a podcast. Are you kidding me? How embarrassing. But again, now I'm on the other side of it. So I feel like I have something to offer. And having just touched on this a few times, so many men have reached out to me that listen to this show and my stuff, and they're like, oh my God, thank you for talking about that. I quit it too. And
so cool.
Fuck that. Like, let's break free from that prison and have actual meaningful interactions that are based on intimacy and love. And it's a really positive thing to be able to share.
So cool. It's amazingly awesome to hear. I want to make an observation, and that is, earlier in my spiritual travels, like a friend of mine offered to me that if you're enlightened, or if you've reached a certain state of awareness, that you would know that a sign of that would mean you would no longer desire sex. And I completely disagree with this.
God, I hope not.
Yeah,
I'm going to stop meditating.
Yeah, exactly. But I completely disagree with it. And one thing that I want to offer again is this is where individual choice comes into it. So you could have complete awareness and choose to engage in sexuality, either alone, with a beloved, in ceremony. It doesn't mean that if you become aware and enlightened that you have to give up your humanity. In fact, we are embodying this, solar energy, advanced energy within the body. We're here to be in the body. So we are going to be human beings. We're going to have preferences. We're going to have attributes, abilities, challenges. But I just want to make that point. But because I think when we talk about awareness or a stage of enlightenment, or it goes on forever. So I mean, to call it enlightenment, it's just like what level are you at? Because the scene just gets bigger and bigger and bigger. So it'll just go on eternally. So I just want to say that gaining awareness is an expansion of what it means to be a human being. It's not a contraction; it's an expansion.
Absolutely, and I love the idea of not denying the physical form.
No.
It's like that thing. For years I went through this sort of inner struggle with editor, please get that cough out of there for me.
With
yeah,
stuff in
like
my
we're
throat.
at the 3 hour mark. At the 3 hour mark, usually I get kind of like.
I actually am gonna have to go in
no, we will
within 10 minutes.
We're wrapping it up right now.
I'm so glad this has been
amazing. It's really good.
Incredible.
This is a perfect.
I think I just met like one of my new best friends.
Thank
Story.
you. Likewise.
We could like hang.
It's been an amazing conversation.
Thank you so much.
Okay, editor, we're back in now for clarity. Something that I struggled with for a long time was this vilification of ego. And in my initial explorations into spirituality, it was like, okay, ego bad, spiritual guy good. So I have to get rid of this ego. And upon further sort of research and development of my understanding, I've totally come to embrace my ego, because it's the way I contextualize it is it's part of the animal body. It's part of the human experience. Like my dog sitting here, she has her little ego instincts and all her little needs in a different sense, obviously on a, with a different level of mental ability. But my sense of ego is like, okay, I want power, I want attention, I want security, I want sex, I want money, I want more food, I want sugar, I want all of this like satisfaction that the body wants to stay alive. And to deny, and sex, of course, included within that, to deny that is to actually deny the gift that God's given me in my embodiment. And that the game is in building an awareness of it to the degree where you're its master, not the other way around. And it goes back to even in my early yogic training, it's about like fucking hatha yoga. You hold that pose even though your ego is fighting it. Your spiritual will gain dominion over the body, but not vilify it and not demonize that part of yourself. And I think that this is a huge error in a lot of the Judeo-Christian approaches to religion, where this sin idea comes in, and that if you sin, you're bad. And to me, sin is it's your ego just acted up a little bit and you did some uncool shit. Because you don't have dominion over your ego, because you've been trying to fight a part of yourself that you can't get rid of if you're in a physical form. Mm-hmm. So I'm all for the expression of sexuality and eating great food and making some money and having a big, beautiful home and doing the human body instinct thing without it not becoming a puppet of that. Would you be in alignment with that?
Yeah, total alignment of that.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's very, very, if I didn't have an ego, I wouldn't be in this life. I wouldn't even be here. So there has to be some aspect of ego for us to even be here. And I've come to love the parts of me, the part of me that loves to perform, The part of me that loves to have the coolest pants in the room. I always will, forever.
Right.
Like if I'm in the room,
That's great.
10 people are coming up to me like, where did you get those pants? Like literally. And I always thought, like, did you see Searching for Sugarman, that movie?
Oh,
remember, he's like the musician who was famous in South
oh
Africa.
yeah. Oh
And they
my
go
God.
and they find
Amazing.
him and he's like dressed up like, you know, Jimi Hendrix while he's painting the house.
Yeah.
I'm like, dude, that's me.
That
Like,
guy was rad. Rodriguez or something.
I think
Yeah.
it's Rodrigo.
Badass. Famous in South Africa only.
And never knew that he was.
Oh yeah, that's right.
But he was a painter, just a house painter, but he always went like completely in his thing,
Right.
like in his whole vibe.
Right.
And so the thing is it's like when I look at those parts of myself that like to perform, or let's even talk about, you know, photographing this form, like doing photo shoots and like, you know, styling them and setting them up and making them artful and all this stuff. I have to love that aspect because this form is an aspect of this divine life form that has taken a body this way. And so on a surface level, you could say, well, she's an egomaniac, or like, why is she always taking pictures of herself? Or, you know, and even like my gurus, like, you know, he loved to see photos of himself. But in fact, it's like, it's a celebration of this form. And so if I'm not going to celebrate her, who really is? I mean, at the end of the day, because it's like, you know, I came in to master this form, and so that's, you know, that's something to cherish, to celebrate, and to not be trying to change or trying to shame the natural parts of yourself, which is why I feel fully spiritually empowered to go into fashion in this new way. I mean, fashion could change the culture, right? And if it was seeped in ceremony and activated with these other qualities, what could fashion do as a movement? If it was made in, you know, not in mass the way that it is, but just in example, really, for people to then DIY their own threads, like in this cool way, right? But the other thing that I wanted to make mention of is I think it's very difficult to be it's a thankless job in a sense to be a way shower or a guru or a teacher or a bringer of the light, because everybody that's listening to you, they have all of their senses coming at you, and they're suspiciously trying to find the one place where you might be full of shit, right? And that's good, because it's good to be skeptic. It's good to have that skepticism. But what I would like to offer people is be careful that you don't throw the baby out with the bathwater, because every spiritual teacher, just like every human being, can have a treasure for you, can have a gift for you to pick up that one point and add it to your own design or your own necklace or whatever it is. And there'll be things in every human embodiment that will not add up, you know, that will just be a contradiction. And, you know, at a future episode...
Like my swearing.
Like you're swearing.
Teach someone to meditate and be like, this is a fucking great meditation, right? And they're like, what? Wait, what just happened?
You just said that. And this is what I would like to do, a series on Wild Wild Country.
Oh my God.
I have been dying. I think you might be a great candidate to do this with. I've been looking for the right person that has
so
the awareness.
fascinating.
That documentary has so much richness in it, and it's very, very useful because it's good for us to understand that when you are merged in the divine mind and you are bringing in a body of wisdom at that level, there are many other things that are going on, and it's a bunch of gray matter. I mean, and that movie is so horrifying on so many levels. I mean, crazy. And also, the filmmakers sort of missed it because they never presented the brilliance of what the entity was bringing through.
Right. I didn't get that. And for some reason, Osho's always eluded me. Osho to me is always like, oh yeah, that's the guru all the women are into. Like I've never known any dudes that are about Osho.
Right.
I just missed his radar field somehow.
Right.
But in that series, this is the documentary she's referring to, you guys, documentary series on Netflix, Wild Wild Country.
It's the Duplass brothers.
Yeah, I never got his message out of it. And I was like, well, why is everyone at the ashram? I want to see the magic. And I never got, I mean, I guess it's part of the mystique of it, but you never really know if he's kind of in on it with homegirl or if she just went fucking power mad and went nuts and he was innocent and just being chill.
But what I want to know,
I don't know.
What I want to know is who was sewing those outfits for him.
I know, right? So dope. So dope.
Literally.
Speaking of guru garb, like that.
However, I know multiple people who were in that community.
Really?
Personally, yeah. And I have read many of his books, and I have to say that he was speaking divine truth, in my estimation, 92% of the time. And then there would be an 8% where I would be like, yes, my whole body vibrating, yes, yes, yes. And then all of a sudden he'd say something and I'd be like, like, no, like, what do you mean? Like, there was a weird disconnect.
Yogi Bhajan is like that for me too.
Really?
Not such a high ratio in his favor. It's,
it's kind of 50-50.
Well, 50-50, half the shit, it's like, today eat 45 pounds of peas and it'll open your pineal gland. I'm like, really, dude? Like, where is this download coming from? Some of it's a little tough for me to grasp, and I'm very receptive. But a lot of the Yogi Bhajan stuff, I'm like, I don't know, that sounds like bullshit. Sorry. And then there'll be some nuggets that are amazing. Like one of my favorites of his is, if you don't see God in everything, you don't see God in anything, or something. I might even have it wrong, but something to the idea that even the evil and everything that we see is all in the container of God. So there's some profound nuggets of wisdom, but a lot of things that I'm like, really, dude? I'm not on board.
Come on.
Yeah.
But what's good is it's good that we're talking about this, because you just have to use your discernment. And in human behavior, we tend to want to make everything one way. Like, oh, you're perfect, or I'm going to put you on a pedestal until I rip you down and throw you in the gutter.
Right.
And the point of the matter is just chill out, man. Just listen, listen, and just take what serves you and stop trying to make everybody all good or all bad. I'm not interested in being put on a pedestal to be ripped down. Like, I know what's coming after that.
Right.
And one of my gurus used to say, don't bow down and kiss my feet, because I know what's coming after that.
Wow.
Literally don't do that.
Yeah.
And so just use what serves you, leave the rest, and be neutral, loving, compassionate, and create your own path, because your path to enlightenment is going to be unique to you and you alone. It's your life. I'm not responsible for anybody else's life. I'm only responsible for mine, and I am responsible for mine. So that's the purpose of having these kind of talks.
Hot damn. I just remembered the actual quote.
Okay.
And maybe we'll close on this. If you don't see God in all, you don't see God at all. Boom. There it is. Thank you, Yogi Bhajan. That's the 50% that I believe in. Thank you so much for joining me today. This has been an awesome conversation. I'm glad that I warned you, that I said, I think we're probably going to need 2 or 3 hours. I don't know why. Sometimes an hour, I bang it out. We're good. Like, we covered the thing. There were things that we missed. I wanted to go into a little more of the conscious parenting that you've done, but I think we might need another couple hours just for that down the road, and unschooling and homeschooling. I really wanted to cover that, but the universe did not want that to be discussed in great detail. But I think we've really created some value here. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you. I am actually working on an online I'm trying to put together a homeschooling product, like a PDF and then audio, because I have a lot of young parents reaching out to me, and I don't want them to have to wait for a publishing situation.
Right.
So I'd love to down the road come back on. And then I also wanted to ask you,
maybe I'll be hitched up by then and ready to have a kid. I really need that information. There's no fucking way I'm sending a kid of mine to school. Like, it ain't gonna happen.
Well, we'll talk about all of that.
Or at least not a traditional school.
I totally feel you on that. I would really like to, at some point, have a complete dissection of Wild Wild Country. I think it would be awesome.
Oh, my God.
And you would be amazing to do it with. So, I don't know.
I'm
Think about
totally
that.
Game. I could watch that series 50 times.
I did too.
Everything about it is just...
Me too. So compelling.
Every 5-minute segment of each of the many episodes is just like, wait, what?
What?
Yeah, it's just insane. And also that I was living in Northern California in the early 80s with my mom. That's right before I got sent to my own kind of cult boarding school that was, not dissimilar in many ways. And I'm
Wow.
like, whoa, all that time, that right up the road in Oregon, that shit was going down. So yeah, I'm fascinated by that. My closing question for you is, I honestly, and I say this to all the guests, like, oh, I've learned so much today with you. I'm rolling my eyes, guys. Sometimes I learn a lot. Sometimes it's just a cool conversation. But honestly, I've been listening like a fucking student here today. I've learned so much. So who have been 3 teachers or teachings that you might send our audience to for further inquiry?
Well, I'm just going to... The 3 people that come to my mind are personages who have been sort of my soulmates in my lifetime. And they're kind of a diverse group, but I guess I'll just say them. The first one is Yogananda, so Autobiography of a Yogi. It's a classic. He's a consciousness that is connected with everything that I do, and it's not through the Self-Realization Center. It's through other experiences. Very, very deep soul connection with this being. The second one is Charlie Chaplin.
Wow, I've heard Yogananda on the show, not Chaplin. That's good.
Yeah, Charlie Chaplin, it's this knowing that I share some energy with him, and I don't know why. I feel like I know him in another time space, someone who came from a very traumatic childhood with his mom being crazy and living on the streets and being an orphan, and rising into what he created in comedy, in music, literally changed the face of culture. One of the first people to speak out against, Nazism. I mean,
wow.
An incredible being.
Wow.
And also, accused of pedophilia or but in my experience, he was a child. His growth was stopped on the streets when he was an orphan, when his mom was crazy. And so it wasn't that he was like that. It was like that was the age that he related to. And later he married Una, who was his beloved for many years, and they had like 11 kids or something. That life to me is like what a beautiful life.
Wow, how interesting. I didn't know anything about him other than the
just
little hat, the dance, the jig, and the mustache. I'm totally ignorant of his whole scene.
Incredible. And,
cool.
And then the third one is Isaac Dennison, who was the author who wrote Out of Africa and the subject of that movie. And she was a very successful writer, when women were not revered, and she traveled, from Europe and had a farm in Africa, and just a woman that signifies courage and setting, pushing the boundaries for other people behind. So it's not exactly 3 spiritual.
Oh, no, it's fine.
But
yeah,
those are 3 beings that for some reason I feel as if I know them, and their lives have served as treasured lanterns for me.
Awesome.
And so I honor them and I thank them.
And so do we, and thank you for the creative answer. I always ask, I've never missed one, which is crazy because sometimes I can be forgetful. But I'm always pleasantly surprised at some people's answers. They're so random. Like, Charlie Chaplin, really? There's the obvious ones, like people will say Jesus, Yogananda, some of the big figures, but that's very cool. Okay, in closing, where can people find you? Website, social media, anything you want to link to?
Okay, so if you want to connect with me further, subscribe to my podcast, Divine Throughline. It's on iTunes under SriMati, SRI.
I listened this morning to a beautiful meditation exercise that you led on your podcast. I thought that was a really cool format. Yeah.
Thank you. Well, in the beginning, I would do an episode and then a healing technique along with it. Then I kind of got out of that for a little bit. So like I said, I'm launching a new format that is going to have a very fleshed out episode that's more like the monthly theme. And then there'll be original music, but I'm creating this kind of new music that is for activating soul memory. So it's a lot of sounds and sort of, I would say meditation, but
cool.
Not. It's actually both.
The one I listened to today was, it was like the humming meditation or whatever. Yeah, it was
awesome.
Cool. I was making my morning smoothie, so I didn't do it, but I listened to the music and it was vibey. Yeah, it was cool.
Cool, thanks. And then you can find me. So the podcast then it'll be like a format. You can find out everything else about me at SriMati.com. Follow me on Instagram at SriMati. And I have my album, so I'm going to be doing more music. So it's on iTunes and CD Baby. I have 2 albums that I recorded with my boys over a 7-year period, Jai Home and Mother of Mine. And
you're on Spotify too.
Yeah, Spotify, exactly. Yeah. And then Divine Throughline. I do retreats with my beloved Rich Roll. It's ourplantpowerworld.com, or you can find it via my site. We're going to Italy next year. We go to Italy every May. It's off the hook, crazy week of transformation. And then we have a Kenya trip.
How many people go on those retreats with you guys?
Usually 33 and 10 crew. So
wow.
It's 33 people.
You bring your crew over from here?
Yeah, 10 of us. And it includes my sons and my assistant.
I've seen that on Rich's site, or it's been in the in my periphery at some point.
Yeah.
I'm just like, God, that sounds like such a daunting production. That's amazing that you guys have been able to.
So amazing.
You've been able to refine that and make that happen.
It's really super meaningful. It's been extraordinarily amazing use of time. I'm going to be in Miami in November for my own solo retreat. It's the second time that I'm doing it at Sacred Space. And I'm also...
have you done anything there yet?
Yeah, I did a retreat last February.
Oh, cool. Yeah, they just contacted me about doing some stuff. It looks like a neat scene they have going on there.
It's a beautiful space.
Cool.
Yeah, they're really great people.
Cool.
You should do it.
That's
awesome.
It's
totally cool. So you can find out that info on my site or Conscious City Guide. And then also I'm starting a very... exclusive mastery transformation where I'm taking 5 to 8 people deep off the cliff. And I'm going to be doing that on the island of Gozo in Malta.
Whoa.
I did a retreat in Malta last year. I have a deep past life connection to that land, and the rock is very ancient, older than Egypt.
Where is Malta? Is that in the Mediterranean or something?
Yeah, it's below Sicily. It's a little teeny island in south of Italy. And Gozo is very primitive, like white rock and the most incredible scenery. So I'm going to be doing really like a life initiation that includes programming of a crystal and an actual talisman painting that's a soul activation. It's like a portal activation of the soul. So it's a big one. And going to be for just a select people. So I'll be announcing that in the following
That's
days.
Awesome. How inspiring.
Yeah.
So cool. You have all this stuff going on.
Yeah, I'm like you. I have 15 things
That's
at one
amazing.
time.
That's amazing. All right, cool. Well, thanks again for joining us on the show.
Thank you.
We're going to get you out of here. You can go to the Getty and see your friend. We'll pack this junk up and get out of here.
Awesome.
I'm ready to go to Air One and get some grub on, huh?
Absolutely.
That's what's up, Mikey. All right, thanks again, and look forward to seeing you for part 2, and we'll do a deep dive on your parenting experience.
Awesome.
So I think you have a lot to share there. Your kids seem very lit and conscious, so I want to know how you did that.
Okay, thanks, Luke. Blessings.
You too.